Welcome to another episode of By the Numbers, the quintessential Counterstrike podcast. I am your host, Richard Lewis. Joining me is the esports historian, Duncan Thorin Shields. And we're going to be talking about the few happenings that are going on in the world of Counterstrike right now, which isn't a lot. I reckon we could be in for another short show. Every time I say that, of course, 3 hours later, we're talking about Nagarfal curries and shitting through the eye of a needle. So we'll see where it ends up today. Obviously, first up, shout out to the sponsor of the show, NordVPN. If you want to get yourself 74% off the product there, it's great. You go to nordvpn.com/RLS. Be sure to sign up, support them because they support us. But anyway, Counter-Strike, it's great, isn't it? Let's go with one of the big stories that emerged today, again, courtesy of Swedish tabloid rag Expressen. We've had some progress in the CSGO major, and that is that the Swedish government, I mean, this is just to give a summary of the article, the Swedish government have now recognized that esports players will be allowed to have some of the exemptions a regular sports personality or athlete would have, and that is that they can now enter Sweden provided they are able to get a negative COVID test as they do so.
Which basically applies to every country you go to at the moment. That's not even weird on that one, yeah.
Yeah. So this the main stumbling block at the moment is whether or not they will be allowed an audience in the arena. Now, again, for sports events, there have been some exemptions made where you can enter. I think in Sweden it's at a 25% capacity. I'm not too sure off the top of my head, but I think that's what they were operating on for, football matches and hockey matches, etc., that kind of thing. But anyway, for esports at the moment, as it would stand, you wouldn't be allowed an audience in the arena. There wouldn't be a crowd there. PGL have said that's absolutely unacceptable. Yeah. We want to have an audience. This is our big event. That is a stumbling block for us. And so this is put into, in a process, another series of debates and discussions. And now we're not going to get a definitive decision about that until September the 15th, because the gears of government grind slow everywhere all over the world. So, there's some thoughts I've got on this, which I'll just share now. I think it's great that PGL is sticking to their guns. I understand people do have safety concerns. I still believe there are ways to have events with crowds where things can be done safely and at a minimal risk to anyone in attendance, especially given the proliferation of vaccines, especially given all of the measures that will doubtlessly be taken around the event itself, and obviously the travel restrictions in the country themselves, and just in general where Sweden are at along their pandemic timeline. So I fully support PGL in this. It might be one of these things that get me cancelled without me really thinking about it. But I'll just say it plainly. I don't want to have a major without a crowd. I don't care if that makes me a bad guy for saying it. Like, won't you think about the virus or whatever? Been doing nothing but thinking about the fucking virus for almost 2 years now. And what I also think about when I'm not thinking about the virus is I think about Counter-Strike and the state it's in and what would give us like some kind of bright light shining over the horizon. And it would be having a really good major with all the top teams in attendance, and obviously having a crowd there and finally being able to hear a crowd cheer when we get a sick play, which is something that Counter-Strike does better than any other esport. That unbelievable moment of a high-skill play translating immediately in the brains of thousands of people at once. So I fully support PGL. I hope Sweden see sense and understand that there are ways to do this logistically. But obviously that does mean there is still a chance last minute, and it would be very last minute if we had to start planning in September, the whole event could be moved to Romania, where they are being more open to the idea of having crowds gather at sporting events. So what are your thoughts, Don?
The issue for me is this. We're not debating do we have the major but with a compromise of limited crowd, or do we have no major? That is not on the table, and I don't want anyone to act as if it is. The choice, as Richard's pointed out here, realistically, is have the major in Sweden, which thus far there have yet to be the guarantees it can actually have the proper crowd environment, which would essentially make it spiritually a major, or we could have it in Romania and potentially have the full crowd, which would meet that billing. So my problem is this. If I have to pick the two, it's an easy to fucking no-brainer, like you're saying. I pick Romania instantly. Like, I just looked it up here, what the actual, like, capacity for the Globen, which was going to be the venue in Sweden is, which apparently, by the way, has been renamed to, like, the Avicii Arena, because that guy died, obviously. Yeah, basically, it can fit, apparently, 16,000 people in it, right? Even if they said something like only a fourth of the people can come in. Listen, 4,000 people is still enough. I've been to events where if you space them out right, put them all at the front, for example, that could be enough to still give like the vibe for the players. So here's the thing. If they can make it at least something like that, I think it's fine. I think that's enough. Like, I might even argue then, for example, maybe 4,000 in Sweden, just because of what the location's like. Maybe that would be a better 4,000 crowd than maybe a 10,000 in a different country. I don't know. It depends what sort of people are going to go to the event, doesn't it? I mean, when we had the Cluj Poker event, for example, some of the crowd maybe weren't that into it. Yeah, who knows? So my problem is this. I hate the way this story is being revealed to the public, because it's not being revealed, you'll notice, Richard, by you or by Jacob Wolf or by Mira, who's at your site now, or HLTV.org. It's not being reported by the legit people. Here's who I keep getting the information from. One, behind the scenes, I know PGL, so I have the real info. Then secondly, the public info. Dude, even the accounts doing these tweets are really suspicious to me. Why are the Astralis and NIP fucking team accounts the ones breaking this news to me in esports? Why did they have a direct... You know the fucking answers, these are rhetorical questions. Why have they got such a direct connection to tabloid sites in the Nordic region that they are the ones leaking? That's where I see this info first, Rich, on my Twitter timeline. From fucking teams. And the implication, by the way, if you know these teams... Louvre Agreement teams is like, let's just fuck with one of ESL/Weiser's enemies. Let's just put let's put extra pressure on them. Like, I noticed that detail you said there, that basically they won't have an answer from the government till September or something. But when it was PGL that had to reply, they were supposed to reply within a week and go and meet this woman in person, which was going to fix everything. Remember that, guys? Remember Reddit? How this fucking minister was going to fix everything and the mayor of Stockholm was going to fix that. Nothing's fixed. Like, I don't care. If there's one thing I'm sick and tired of from politicians, it's when they tell me they're doing something. Politicians only do or don't do things. There's no trying to do something. Trying to do something is what you do when you want to politically seem like you're going to do something, but in the end not do it. You want to basically extract all the value from it, but at the end decided not to. Or you go, hitches, things came along, we couldn't answer. That can't happen for this, because as we're pointing out, like, this is a tournament, if people don't understand, will cost millions of dollars, millions to run. And I'd go ahead and say, especially in the current climate, it's definitely going to be a loss leader. They're going to fucking lose money putting this tournament on. So in that world, by the way, maybe they wouldn't in Romania, who knows? But in that world, it's entirely within the remit of PGL to be the ones who make the demands and set the thresholds that someone else, such as the location, meets to do that. Because I have to say, we alluded to it in a past episode, but the reason why I bring up the whole Weiser/Louvre Agreement / these teams doing it is because there is a dirty implication here that's like, PGL just wanted to secretly run a Romanian major the whole time. Yeah, what? They just engineered the virus as well, did? What the fuck are you talking about? By the way, that's like one thing if someone on one of these talk shows, just pure speculation, said it. People are saying that who are like credible people, as though it was like, as though there was any basis to it. There isn't. It's completely pulled out of someone's arse. Notice again, this is why I brought up the lack of esports press. Where's the person from esports who's saying that? Where's the person on any other point? Is there anyone on HLTV that confirms come out and said, I've heard from behind the scenes, actually, PGL really wants to. No, you haven't heard that from anyone. Yet it exists as a narrative. It's purely concocted, as far as I can tell. I would guess by like some people who are rivals of PGLs, but I can't see where the basis to it is. So personally, I don't even think there's much drama. So I'm just sort of waiting to see, does the Swedish government give in the demands? If so, cool. I will go to Stockholm and have an awesome major there. If it's to Romania, then fuck Sweden, I'll be off to Romania. So for me, it seems like actually everything's sort of figuring itself out. But I can see for fans, until they know one way or the other, it's going to be up in the air, innit?
Well, if you look at on Twitter, and you've already brought this up, this was going to be what I wanted to talk about next. You will, of course, see your boy Hitcham Shaheen tweeting about how they did it. And by
You know
they,
what I mean? It's gross, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah.
It's
Well, I
fucking
mean,
gross.
look. So I see the player. I see the pieces on the chessboard here. You're, you're newly floating on the Nasdaq. You've recently, it's now official that you've merged with that Chinese company EV5. You're back in to league via the way of the LPL, I think it is,
Yes.
and so you've got, you've got Ninja's branding over in China.
I will say, just for a detail for people who don't follow League, it is actually hilarious though, because even though the LPL is the best league in League of Legends, they've picked the team that not only was last place, they lost every game. They went 0-16 in best of 3. So if anything, Nip fucking nailed it with that branding.
The only way is up, though. That's actually.
Exactly. Yes, he's going to say we won infinity times more games than that.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Because think about it. If they get appreciably better after the merger, they're geniuses, And this is basically the Hitcham Chahine model right now. Obviously, it's unbelievably important. In terms of their things like share price now, they have to consider, but also just being big political players, that it looks like they have political pull within Sweden. And so obviously we'll never know how much influence, if any, they had over this decision. I would probably wager they do have a little bit.
I'm sure they got some people they can call. Yeah, of course.
Exactly. But beyond that, the idea that you're going to come out and say we fucking did it is laughable. But anyway, he said we fucking did it. Esports athletes are now able to go under the same travel exemptions as other sports in Sweden. Amazing work by our director of communications and PR and the NIP team, together with the different federations. So they have took the lion's share of the credit via there. And I'll just tell you, I guarantee they've had negligible, if any, influence over this decision. This is something that, we know for a fact the mayor of Stockholm objected to this. He is a mayor of a major city, the major city in Sweden, and he's talking about how these rules and a non-recognition of esports is affecting his bottom line and stopping big events being held in the city. I think that carries a bit more weight than the musings of Hitcham Chahine. So, genius though he is. So for me, this is just sort of bad taste, but it does show as well, this new breed of esports personality, esports owner that we have, where they will clamor over themselves to sort of take credit for things and get as much spotlight on them. It's very much the Astralis model, as kind of purposed by Nicola Nyholm, where every time a major Danish happening was there, they had an opinion on it. Every time, there was like, hey, let's talk about burnout. Well, here's what we're doing. Yeah, working your players into the fucking ground is what you're doing. But they always wanted to be out front and center with a statement, because if the spotlight's on them, the illusion is that they're industry leaders. Industry leaders must be making money, right? As it happens, by the way, if you want to go and look at the recent announcement, because Astralis released its quarterly reports time, guys. This is where people like me, the true esports nerds, we get to sit and plow through. Not great financially over at Astralis, actually, if you go and have a look at it. But I won't bore you with the details.
I have a bit of detail for you, though, actually, you just reminded me of. Here's a piece of info, because what's beautiful for me is I'm one of the rare people who gets to be in League of Legends and CSGO, which are games that have very little overlap usually. And sometimes info comes between the two games, like when I was able to tell you about the Astralis League of Legends team when they were OG and some of the shit they were doing, which tied into what was going on in the CSGO squad. Here is a fucking rich, it's so beautiful and rich, you're not even going to be able to believe this comes out of the brain of Casper Fid. Remember the same Casper Fid who, when his team was attending an inhuman schedule of events that they were already making the semis of every time, he just demanded they practice even more to a professional sports standard, and none of them could have time off until essentially they used the power of the fucking government to force him to give them time off. Oh, this is great. The next year in League of Legends, they had a player in their team, basically. I was told this actually on my show that I do with Dom, the Crackdown, with the guy who was the coach of the Origin team, basically. He said there was a player who had an injury, and basically something mental, that Casper guy went the opposite way on the League of Legends one, Richard, and told this guy, oh, you're only allowed to play 10 scrims a week or 10 games of solo queue a week because, we're so concerned about your injury. So just in case people haven't figured out what I'm saying here, A bum-ass, nobody League of Legends player who most of you wouldn't even know if you barely follow the game was given like the treatment you would give to like your darling son who's going to be your fucking prince who inherits your empire. People like Device, Glaive, Zipnix, they were told to go and swing from a fucking rope essentially and figure it out with the government, and then they'll get a day off for the fucking salt mine work in Australia. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, why are these people such clowns? Like, and the joke of this, by the way, Richard, is this is how this guy just can't fucking put a foot right. The joke is in CSGO, people were obviously like, look, you're literally burning me to the grid. In League, they were mad the other way, Richard, because obviously 10 games a week's nothing, and he was going, I can't even maintain my level at 10 games. And he was actually barred from playing more games. So, like, these guys, Astralis is the ultimate brain trust. And the sad thing, like you're saying there, is what you hoped people took the lesson from Astralis was the fake aspect of like, build, you know, a winning tradition with great sports. Like, no. What everyone's done is go, oh, what you actually do is just do optics. You just try and get your foot in on every story like that. So, like, I just hate these guys, mate. Like, there's no rhyme or reason to this bullshit. They're just making it up as they go.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about Astralis in just a little bit. But look, just to put a pin in the major story, you know, I think, you know, all things told, I've said it before, so I'll repeat it here. I want Sweden to be the destination. It feels fitting. It feels that is a place that should have had a major before now, maybe. But, you know, with everything that's been going on, and the state of the game and how it's potentially cratering before our eyes, coming out, going to Sweden, essentially the birthplace of modern Counterstrike as we know it, for the resurrection of the game to, you know, come out from there would be fitting. And so, you know, and also I think Swedish crowds, you know, just from experience of going to Swedish events, always been good. Yes. Even as far afield as places like Jönköping, which is, you know, for those who don't know, that is essentially like the equivalent of the fucking Bible Belt in Sweden in a dry venue, you know, and yet always
neutral crowd, right? Even when the Swedes weren't playing, they would always cheer the good teams.
Always. Well, you would always fill that Dream Arena up. You know, you would always fill it up for the Counter-Strike finals, and everyone knew what was going on, and everyone was cheering. So, you know, my experience with Swedish crowds have always been good, and I agree. If we can even get 4,000 people in a stadium, we must absolutely do that at all costs. But the idea of having a fucking empty stadium for a major, I just, you know, we can't in good conscience agree to that.
I had one thing I wanted to tag on that you've just reminded me of before we finish. Here's the reason why as well, Richard. I won't lie. If this was the beginning of the summer, I'd take that deal. Even if you said we can't have a crowd, but we can have the major, I'd say okay. But I tell you what, actually, IM Cologne changed my mind on that. Because when I saw what it's like to have a LAN, listen, it was a LAN in some respects, and you saw some of the impacts. It just didn't feel like a proper LAN, you know. Like, in my mind, I'll remember the great players in the server, but it didn't obviously have the atmosphere of an IM Cologne, ESL1 Cologne in the past, obviously. So I agree. After seeing the way IM Cologne went, the major has to have the crowd. Like, we have to go for it if it's possible. Yeah,
especially with other esports around us, you know. Doesn't seem to be the same kind of hand-wringing going on. You know, they just find a place and host an event. They find a place that works, a place that's safe, and they just host an event there. And, you know, people don't seem to be...
That's because no one stirred the pot, though, in those games. That's why if people think we're just, you know, pointlessly, like, searching for villains everywhere and tilting at windmills, no. The point is, if you look at the major players, they are clearly what you would say, like, you know, shaping public perception on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, I did say we get into Astralis. Seems now is a good time as it does follow on. Obviously, we've had confirmation now of what we told you, I feel like a fucking year ago, honestly, that Zipnix is saying he wants to look at his options. This was a report that came out that he's going to be reviewing his options, and nothing set in stone. It could be that he stays, but in all likelihood, it does look like he's going to be leaving. This, by the way, has been going on in the background for some time. Zipnix is, for those that don't know, Zipnix is the one that has probably been the most geared to leave, let's say. Zonic obviously seems to be going as well. That seems to be a done deal. That's been reported and essentially announced. and we don't know where he's going to go or if he's even going to stay in the game. But yeah, Zipnix did an interview with Mira, as you rightly pointed out. He's moved over to Deserto now. Big loss for HLTV, big gain for my site. Happy with that. And he said it's a great opportunity now to look around, see my options, and see what the future brings. I've had some talks with Astralis, but nothing is set in stone. So actually, what I've been doing this week is I've been reaching out to my source network because, I thought I did break that Smooya story and it kind of feels good to just one-up people, because it's doable. So I've been reaching around to find out what's going on behind the scenes with the Astralis players and what the likelihood is. And I'm
reaching around with Richard Lewis.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, reaching around the Richard Lewis story, actually. But anyway, so let's so just in case people haven't been watching the ESL Pro League, which we're not going to talk about today, we'll get a few groups done first, I think, before we start breaking that down. Obviously, Zipnix has taken a step back. Because they've still got this 6-man roster as they bet in their new Orpa Lucky, and there's a game going on right now, and if you've got 2 monitors up like all the hardcore fans should, you will notice Zipnix is indeed not playing in those games, which of course further seems to suggest he's going to be out the door. And it's a very strange decision to leave him out in particular, given that he was their best player coming out of Cologne statistically. He had like a renaissance of his performance, that mad miracle run they had under the crazy circumstances that they had it. Zipnix was instrumental to that success. And obviously in Astralis, they don't reward good play or anything like that. There's no rhyme or reason to the decisions that are being made over there. So I'll just get your thoughts first of all about Zipnix leaving Astralis, maybe some potential destinations you could think about, and how you think it'll affect the team.
So the first thing I will say is this. Even though I've alluded to the fact that like a bunch of the Astralis players were actually a bit shitty when I sort of was helping them with some stuff last year, and they sort of like I'm kind of out on them now. I will say this, obviously, unless I'm going to reveal private info, I'm just going to go off what we know publicly, like you've just mentioned now. The actual approach Zipnix is taking publicly in this particular case is very shrewd. Because what he did, right, is if you read his statement, the first half of the statement, you're almost certain, this is him saying he's leaving. He's saying he's going to go elsewhere. He's saying like, I've enjoyed my time here since the creation. But he cleverly makes it sound as though you could interpret that he's leaving, but the other half you can interpret as, but he might re-sign. He purposely doesn't actually give you any indication which way he's really leaning. Then a fan will go, but he is starring. Look, he's not in the team. No, that's genius, because that way, unlike other players who were in bad form, everyone knows Zipnix's quality for years and years and years. Anyone who's going to sign him doesn't need to see him play in the ESL Pro League now, and wouldn't, whether he played well or bad, sign him or not sign him on that basis. So all he does in doing so, by the way, is make Astralis the ones that if he gets an offer, have to really think about it, because you don't want this fucking guy just sat on your bench getting money while he plays basically an irreplaceable role, and he might be out the door anyway. So what's clever is he's cleverly put the pressure on all sides. Whoever's coming after him, he hasn't said he's leaving necessarily. You better come with your best offer. And you know what? Any minute he wants to, he can get that starting spot back, and your offer wasn't good enough. So it's actually basically, if I was to say how a player could go about letting everyone know he's available, letting everyone who might be interested know they better play fucking top dollar, let Astralis know they better match every offer to keep his offers nice and high, and then finally have all the options as to where to go himself and all the agency. He's played this perfectly, I think, actually. Like, at the end, he can do any of those options I said, and they're all legit. None of them have been alluded to. So I think he's played it very well. I think in terms of Astralis, this to me is a sign of why Astralis is in deep shit, even though they've signed Glaive. Because, mate, it's bad enough you've lost Device, Zonic. There isn't even a player who plays Zipnix's role to the level he does. They don't exist anymore. Like, we're speculating, maybe like a Valde could do it. So, yeah, that's the point. You're having to sort of like, maybe they could, there's not anyone who's like an obvious either slot in. And there's fucking nobody Astralis is getting, I'm telling you right now, who's going to play this role. So the idea they're letting him go, they're not fucking letting anyone go. This is exactly a play you'd 100% keep, Here's the irony. You can replace Device before you can replace Zipnix, just because how unique the skill set is, So to me, I think it's a terrible move on the Astralis end, but I understand why they have to let it happen. Like, they basically could have had everyone leaving the team. For Zipnix, I also think it is the time to go, especially now that like Zonic, Device have gone. There's no point you staying with Glaive, because actually you probably are going to lack for superstar players. And if you're a player as good as Zipnix is and in such a skilled role-playing role, first of all the star players want you, mate. You may as well go play with them. And then secondly, you need those people to win. You aren't going to win just from the support position. So to me, you look at some of the teams that would be eligible for him. Again, obviously the one that people know from the fake leak fucker was FaZe. Just because to me, mate, if you're going to make one up, that's a pretty good one to make up. Like, I know Carrigan thinks Zipnix is the shit and definitely liked him when he was in TSM.
Yeah.
I'm guaranteed, by the way, every top team who was a rival of Astralis the last few years, I know everyone else thinks they look at it and go, oh, Device really outplayed me. No, they don't think that. If Nico plays Astralis and loses, he doesn't go, Device is better than me. He goes, where's my fucking Zipnix? I've got like busted up off my still, so pretending to be Zipnix. Like, these players who are superstar players, these are players like Glaive and Zipnix are exactly the ones that would be on their fucking Christmas list for their owner, basically. Yeah. Like, just get me these guys and I'll win all the trophies anymore. That's the only reason they were really winning. They had all the extra pieces, So I think personally, he's another player where so many teams should be in the mix. So FaZe would be an obvious one. I would hope, by the way, G2's considering it. You speak fucking English and it's already the supportive players people want caught. You got to at least consider it, surely. So to me, a lot of the big name teams basically should be in the mix for this guy, assuming they have the money.
Yeah, I mean, so just to fill you in on what I've heard from a few sources now, the aspect the fake leak fucker didn't get right is that while I agree, I think FaZe is a great guess and it could happen, but Zipnix, one aspect of it is Zipnix doesn't necessarily, unlike last year when he was considering his options, doesn't necessarily want to commit to moving away by himself. And apparently there's this option to get Zonic, Magisk, and Zip together.
By the way, if they've actually done that themselves, that's a clever approach, because I tell you what, that's how you all get paid way more than you get individually.
Yeah, and so they like the idea of
that's pretty cool. Yeah,
like the idea of posseing up together, and so this could be what brings pull a name out of hat, Cloud9 back to the space. There's your foundation.
Surely you'd be in the mix, right? TSM maybe they're coming back.
So that's a potential trio straight away. But the problem with being a trio, obviously, is your limited options. You need a team that's willing to essentially cut its coach in 2 players. And there's not a lot of them around right now in Tier 1 CS. So,
as you say, someone comes in and you make a team.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing. Tell you what, if you have that trio, it's not like you'll instantly get the other players, but you've got a pretty good fucking base. There's a bunch of players who'll join that team.
And then, obviously, the other aspect to it is you will notice one name isn't there, and that's Dupree. And there's another aspect to why Fake League Fucker took a great guess. Because, Dupree, apparently, much like Device, I think he's got a partner over in Sweden, and he's been back and forth all the time.
He used to have a Swedish government back in the day, so I could believe
it. Yeah, so that's why, maybe a Swedish team would be a good shout for him. And apparently he said, he'd be open to play with Device again. But that means that there is a schism in the team. And so I'm trying to think what else I heard. Shit, man, I was talking to people all week about this. Oh, and that's the other thing. Like, Astralis still apparently want to bring in big names. They want to try and get some big names because they recognize if you lose all of those guys, let's say they all go, there's still a chance Dupree could stick around, by the way. Okay. And so one of the avenues they explored was config. That's a legit thing.
Yeah.
And so
for that, of course, but for other reasons.
Yeah, which obviously, I mean, he's on fucking lockdown contract at Complexity, so I don't even know how they'd make it work, and I doubt Jason wants to sell.
When I was at Flashpoint, there was a lot of people I reached out to, Richard. It's not that they're in any way unhappy. I would just basically say to people, look, whether you're going to stay or not, this isn't League of Legends. There's no poaching rules, mate. Just tell me what your contract terms are, and maybe I can have people make you an offer, and even if you don't take it, maybe that's a road you go down in a couple of years from now. So I was able to get a lot of info on people. And when I asked basically some of the Complexity players, they basically told me, like, I'd listen to an offer, but you have to understand, like, my buyout will be enormous. Like Jason isn't just going to let me go. But if they buy me, it's going to be like a top buyout. So I could imagine, like, Astralis doesn't seem like a team that wants to pay an enormous buyout.
Well, no, and in this market, I mean, if Config's is $1 million player, like, I mean,
And by the way, let's be real. I love Config, but you can, especially with an injury like that, a fucking wrist injury for a Counterstrike.
Yeah, you don't know if he's going to come back.
You never can you? You can't take it for granted. I certainly would hope he would, but you can't take it for granted.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd want to spend $1 million for that,
Well, let me tell you, I thought, I heard about Config being a potential target for Astralis before he broke his wrist, and then I saw the wrist break, and I was like, yeah, here we go again.
Look, I did hear about that a while ago, so I know what you mean. Like, that would be the ultimate Nick and I move. Like, oh no, my bloody wrist. Oh, I tell you what, I probably wouldn't play again. Sell me for like 100k, and then he goes. And then Astralis announces revolutionary new wrist surgery technique that's brought him back to. Yeah. Oh my god, it works totally. You know, like I know what you mean. I can totally see that coming. It's ridiculous.
But to be fair, it's all genuine. So fair enough. You know, he's even posted a lengthy statement about it. Doubt he's going to commit to the bit. You know?
I bet you were thinking the same thing I was, because we've been mourned on this show. In fact, we've even used this exact reference, like that famous event where they brought the fucking punch as hard as you can arcade boxing machine. And pro players, I'm watching like the best players in the world with their fucking mouse hand just bang this shit, drunk out of their minds as well, by the way. And if people don't know, just in case if people have known nothing about combat sports, you can even hit the punch perfect technique and break your hand with a no fucking glove. That's why they wear gloves. Like you don't know. It's actually, you know, in the same ways, it's actually kind of mad that one of the only people who ever died in any kind of travel in esports was the sixth guy. Aside from that, even though there's a million flights, it's never ever happened anyone's died bizarrely. It's the same thing for this. I'm amazed how few injuries there's been to wrists, because pro players do not in any way take care of it. I've seen them wrestling on floors and shit after parties. Like, these kids are ridiculous. They don't get it.
I think you know, there's probably loads of carpal tunnel, like that's just not been diagnosed or whatever. But I mean, that's just another area that we lag massively behind in mainstream sports. But anyway, I mean, the bottom line is everything's up in the air over at Astralis. Anyone who claims otherwise doesn't have the relevant information. And that's all there is to it. And so, you know, there is a world where Zipnix might have to unhitch himself from his preference and play solo, and FaZe could be a good fit. But anyone who's leaking and going, there's a little green tick, give myself a gold star for that one. Like, I can tell you that we're still, you know, this is all still up in the air and nobody really knows what's happening, except the likelihood is that all of those names I just listed are likely to leave Astralis, and Astralis are going to have to spend big to replace them, obviously, because we're talking about the greatest core to ever touch the game. Also, I'll just, you know, we'll break this down probably next week. It's been rough for Lucky. It's been a baptism of fire, let's say. And I've been watching all of Astralis's games. Obviously missing this one now, but I'll be watching the VOD tonight. And it's brutal. Like it's really.
Problem is, though, what do people expect? It's like this is like the LNZ example, except worse, because the LNZ guy isn't expected to use the most influential gun in the game. Like, people have got to stop this. Like, this is why I went out my way to stress for like 2 years that ZWoo being that exceptional right off the bat is not a standard you can hold anyone else to. Like, they're almost even tanking this guy's fucking chances by just tossing him in the mix like this. Like, luckily, obviously, Astralis are beggars who can't be choosers. But mate, if this was Nip, they'd be cutting this guy in a month, wouldn't they? Fucking disgrace.
Yeah, I know, and this is what I mean. Yeah, it's real hard to like bed people in these days, you know, especially when the events that they're playing at. You know, this is why the Academy League was something that needed to happen like 2-3 fucking years ago. Yep. And we should never have had all of this fuckery around like, oh, we're secretly owning teams that are kind of our Academy side and we're not declaring it publicly. So people come in and go, right, well, you can't do this because you're using it to try and rig the outcome of tournaments, and that can't happen. You know, we should have had a delineated fucking Academy League for recognized Academy teams.
All the top orgs, yeah.
Yeah, that, you know, we should have had. I mean, again, it's like what they got in League. So, you know, there are things that people can learn from other esports, you know, providers out there. It's just everyone in CS, because Valve have been so hands-off, just does the most corrupt fucking thing they can possibly do to benefit themselves, thinking it's never going to come back on them. And it doesn't for years. But what it does is it does harm the scene. It does leave a lasting stain on what we're trying to build over here. So, again, I'm fully in on that WePlay League, and I hope that continues. I hope that becomes a staple of the calendar, because it's vitally essential. You know, imagine a world where Lucky had been playing in Astralis Academy for 2 years and gets brought through, you know, for his first big tournament, but knowing that, you know, he's going to have a much better time of it because it's not a massive step up, you know, but instead he's been kind of fed to the fucking lions a little bit, and people are already criticizing him, which I get, you know, but like obviously, you know, there's a clip of him on the front page of Reddit now as we went to start the show of him like giving a team kill, give a round, you know, give a map away. Stuff like that's going to wreck someone's confidence, and the community are going to be there to ensure that that reckoning fucking happens. Like it's rough. Anyway, the next big story that we should probably talk about is, while we're talking about potential old school players joining teams, there's a report coming out of theclutch.com.br that coldzera is a potential transfer target for Team Liquid, where he would replace Grim. Now, I'll just let you, I know you've got material for this one, so I give it to you, the people. Have it, Duncan.
The maddest part about that is that sentence was fine until the last word. So basically, here's what life's like if you're Grim. You're playing a team called Triumph, right? The only reason you're even relevant is because, one, it's online CS, and two, NA is actually in a really bad spot competitively. Then you dominate. Go back and look. For months, this guy was tearing everyone's arse up. He was like basically solo carrying on this team all the time. His stats were mega. So he gets the big call up to the big team. But you know what? If you know anything about the way games work in like CS, here's how it always works. When you join the team, it's like musical chairs, and there's one chair left, and you just have that choice, and the music stops. Like you just have to take whatever's role's left. So he comes into a team that has Elige, Naf, Twitch. You're not getting any fucking spots you like, mate. You'll just get whatever's left over. And even worse, even when they leave, we're bringing in fuckers like Fallen. And listen, Lorpa's going to have some resources. So basically, as far as I can tell, I would anticipate this guy never really got to play his game. I would imagine he just made do. He's obviously the newer player. He knows he has no status to complain. He just did whatever he could. And then basically, they got to the point where, oh, cool, now I can play LANs again now. We're just going to replace you with coldzera, who didn't do fucking anything for like 6 months and just wasted someone else's time and salary, all while, as usual, giving not even any good excuse for what was going on while playing Godwin rosters. So it's just welcome. You know what, Grim? Welcome to Counterstrike, mate. This was your real welcome to Counterstrike moment. Now you know what the scene's actually like. You were living in this weird world of online where things were different and all the rules applied. This is cutthroat fucking Counterstrike for you, mate. Because what did that guy do to deserve to be cut? I missed something. As far as I can tell, they never actually attempted to use him. Because my problem with signing a player like him is this is some bonehead 15 years ago recruiting where you just recruit the guy beating you in the game. You recruit people for what they can do in your team, dumb fuck. You don't recruit the striker of the opposing team when he can't play striker or midfielder in your team and pop him at fucking left back, do you? You recruit him if you're going to be a striker on your team. So if you recruited Grim, in my opinion, the only way you could have done that in good faith was to replace Naf or Twists, some star player, and see if he is the next star player. Because instead, as far as I can tell, you just popped him in a bunch of roles that probably aren't his roles. He did okay statistically. And now, it's not even that coldzera's better. It's that you just have players who have a fucking boner for coldzera, Stewie and Fallen, and probably Elige as well. And then they're all just going to, like star fuckers, just let this guy have this other guy's job. And Grim never gets a chance to develop or actually play proper lands, etc. Fuck him, I guess, right?
Well, just to also underline, I'll give my why I think this move. And I'll explain why I'm doubtful, but I'll just also explain why I thought I'll put this in the show rundown today, not just because we got fuck all else to talk about. But in general, the leaks coming out involving Brazilian players do seem to genuinely be legit. Not really a lot of lockdown, you know, when it comes to where people are moving to. I'm trying to think of a major Brazilian roster change that came as a fucking surprise that we didn't know about weeks in advance. And so that gives it a little bit of credence. I know he's been a target for Team Liquid in the past. I know the players rate him. Fallen being there. I mean, obviously, I know they've had their ups and downs, but let's also be real. It's probably like one of those relationships where, sort of like with Flusher and Fnatic, you had to go away to appreciate what you had. Sure. And maybe Fallen spend some time away from coldzera. You know, Fallen is the guy who fucking launched coldzera's career, literally plucked him from obscurity to make the Voltron that was the Luminosity team and then later the SK Gaming team that was the dominant force for 2 years in Counter-Strike. So, it's got credence for that. Also, I noticed just in terms of interviews, I've interviewed a bunch of players now from Liquid. I interviewed Stewie live when I hosted the RMR. I interviewed Elige on my podcast, The Richard Lewis Show. And they all said the same thing, essentially, that for some reason, they don't feel that Grim is the complete player he should be yet, and that their work and that they feel the bottleneck for their overall skill ceiling seems to emanate from him. Now, I don't see that when I watch a game. When I watch a game, I feel that Grim does his job. And I also feel his job has clearly changed during the various iterations of Team Liquid. But they also have said, and it's
I would imagine he's bottom of the totem pole. It just seems like the obvious place he would be, wouldn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, and they have said that, he's make mistakes, he does this sometimes wrong, and he does this, and we have to play him here, and that's not ideal. And, they focus a lot on him, and I agree. I kind of feel like it's almost like, when you come in as the fifth man, you don't have the reputational component to who you are within a team. It's very hard to sort of stand up to an Elige, to a Stewie 2K, to a Fallen, and go, nah, this is on you. It's not on me because you're the young rookie. So I think there is a bit of truth in the idea that if Team Liquid does make a roster move, it will be Grim that goes. It won't be Stewie. Yes. It won't be anyone else. As far as they're concerned, they are super happy with that 4. And so the next one up, by the way, it would be Fallen. It goes Grim and Fallen. And if they're happy with Fallen, who's back to IGL in now, and who fuck it? Well, I mean, I've heard that maybe they're gonna split it with Stewie or something crazy. Like It's all over the fucking place at the moment at Team Liquid. That's what's mad. They don't seem to have any fucking rhyme or reason or any plan. And so I can also believe this is a roster move potentially. But here's what I'll add. This report does come, so it's a Brazilian translation of a Cybersport report. Cybersport, the same publication, if I remember correctly, that said I called Blade a clown when I never did. So they're already on thin fucking ice with me, and just in terms of their accuracy, you can say it's nothing. And when you look at the guy that the report emanates from, they said Mouse Sports was cutting Dexter and Fnatic is definitely signing Smoothie. So they're
throwing a lot at the wall.
Yeah. In other words, look, listen, this is the dirty secret of sports reporting, right? All of the transfers on the back page, it's all guesswork and bullshit. And it has been for as long as I've been alive, You get your fucking copy of your tabloid when you're on your building site, and you open the back pages, and there's just loads of transfer. And they even frame it, transfer rumours. Now, what do you think's really going on there? Do you think every reporter that works at a tabloid has a network of fucking, sources, the physios, the agents, the secretaries, at these clubs? Or do you think they just go, that player is definitely unsettled and that would be a good move for him? I'm going to say that's a rumour. And if it comes true, I look great. But honestly, if you go and look at the accuracy of the sports reporting when it comes to transfers, especially in football, soccer, if you're American, it's terrible. The accuracy is terrible. And there are very few people that have it nailed down. That fella that, the Italian chap has it nailed down. That's that's a guy who has a 100% accuracy record in a turbulent world like football. That guy has a network. Billy Bumfuck, who writes at The Sun, doesn't. And so I think we're getting there in esports now. I think the rise of shit like Danish leaks and, the rise of clickbait as a model in general means that you are now just going to see guesswork for transfer news, and they get to hide under, behind the shield of they were definitely in talks, knowing that no one will ever come out and clarify they weren't in talks. Which, by the way, if you're a pro player and someone says you were in talks with someone else and you weren't, feel free to throw them under the fucking bus. You've done it to me enough times for trying to get you out of bad contracts. So definitely use your platform. So, look, this could be a 50-50. I'll also just add as well, I saw a clip from Stewie 2K that made it to the front page of the Reddit. And, I know people clip shit out of context all the time, but he was basically talking about Valorant, and people were asking if he was going to make the switch, and he said he's not doing it now, and he loves Counterstrike, but he will make the switch eventually, is how he framed it. Now, again, it was a hard cut, So he probably could have gone on to say
5 years or something.
I would have had to watch the whole VOD.
Yeah.
But the clip itself said eventually, and then it could have been like, well, when NA dies or when CS dies, it could have been like that. So people love to just clip things out of context.
I've got just two little notes to say, by the way, on this topic. One thing, it's the most obvious one. I can't believe no one else is looking at this. Everyone else is just looking at the names on paper, Richard. Way too many egos in this team. Way too many. Way too many. If people don't know, Elige absolutely has an ego and has had people kicked from fucking teams before. Naf has his own ego. He's had players he's bristled with. You might find out about that soon in some content I've got coming up. Of course, without saying Fallen has a fucking ego. This guy had the gall to call his own teammates liars for saying they want to go to SK Gaming so he could stay with his mate at fucking Luminosity. Then went and played for SK Gaming. And Cold Zera. The guy literally flamed his team while on the team, thinking that would get him out while he disrespected all his teammates. Like, the egos are going to be bonkers on this team. And the reason I bring that up is this. Stewie 2K, you're not studying your own life history, mate. Normally when people say learn from history, they mean like other people's mistakes. You already did this. You went and joined fucking SK Gaming when they had Fallen and Cold Zero. By the way, arguably a better lineup than this at the time. You joined that team, and what happened? At the end of the year, they cut you from the fucking team, even though they pretended to like you for the whole year. Right? Not only, one, is it ridiculous to think 3 years later you can run it back with some of the same players who were about half as good as they were back then, and two, where's the self-esteem, mate? Like, I'm not saying, like, this is like a revenge moment, but how cocked are you that they'll cut you, and then you go around, you know what, you can come and, you can shelter in my team, there's a spare bed, like, give me a break. Like, this isn't the move. Like, this is one thing I'll have to make a video on this topic. It'll be called something like, like, kill the fucking royalty when you see it on the road or something, because current players that are active pros who could actually win majors and stuff don't fucking hitch your wagon with a guy who literally won the major 5 years ago. Like, what are the odds these players are going to be awesome now in 2021? That's why I say you're cocked, because they wouldn't do you this favour if you were the one who needed a team. But as long as you've got a spot and they don't have any fucking one paying them salary, yeah, they'll come and pretend to be friendly to you, cause you up to you and get a spot on your team. And I'll tell you what, mate, in about a year from now, if you know anything about Fallen Cold Zera, you will be fucking going to Valorant if they don't like the cut your jib. It won't be you getting them kicked. That ain't the way that they play the game. So I just don't like this generally. Like, listen, on paper, if Cold Zera somehow got back to his form for like 2 years ago, yeah, it's interesting. But right now, to me, this is just like a move, which I think the scary thing about this isn't even the Cold Zera move itself. It's like, what the hell? It's like you're saying, what is the game plan? What is the identity of Liquid that this is the solution? Like, they really think this is the answer at the end of an equation. That's like, how does Team Liquid win the major?
Yeah, and look, I feel as well, though, like, there's just this weird thing going on with Liquid where it's like they don't realise that if you don't make fundamental changes, nothing will fundamentally change. Like, it's so bizarre that they fall back into these, like, bad habits, essentially, these, like, old outdated modes of thinking. They look at the same coaches to fix their issues, like by bringing back Adren, because they remember this one good time that they had, in 2019, where they were like the top, team in the world. And it's like they're trying to get back to that spot without realizing everything else around them has changed. It's not just a matter of if you do what you were doing then, it's all going to work out. Everything's changed. The game's changed. The teams have changed. The landscape's changed. And so it's not even inconceivable that this is bullshit, by the way, and it's all just empty speculation.
I like the obvious one that people immediately guessed the second he was leaving FaZe, when as soon as it said he was like benched or whatever, everyone started guessing this one.
And I'll just say this: if Team Liquid do want to make a roster change that's going to take them to the next level, in my opinion, you don't cut Grim. It has to be Fallen. It has to be. Agreed. If Stewie's going to be your IGL, right? Fallen is essentially a fraction of the player he used to be. Yep. Plus, there will always be that Spectre in the room. It doesn't work when you have a legendary IGL standing behind a fucking up-and-coming IGL. The team wants to be the in-game leader, but when things go wrong, you've always got this option. Or maybe we should give Gabriel a try again. Maybe we should. No, listen. Fallen is an AWPer, and if you judge him solely on that, he can't be in this team if you're serious. And I've said you can go and get OC tomorrow for nothing, probably. No buyout. And I think that improves Team Liquid. And it's a view to a future. It's a developmental player. He's probably not at his skill ceiling yet. Can actually learn things from playing with the likes of Elise and Stewie and Nath. And so that's the move you make, in my opinion. You don't bring, again, washed-up Cold Zera into this team at the expense of a player who, as far as I can tell, like you say, has done nothing wrong. Sometimes you have to be cut, and you have done nothing wrong. Like Lucky in G2, right? Like that when that happened. Just had to go down that way. But this does not have to go down that way. There are other conceivable scenarios. And so I hope this report is bullshit, because it would be, absolutely ridiculous. And just anyone, by the way, who thinks Junior is the guy to go to Liquid to replace Fallen, I would urge you to watch the Bad News Bears games, as I have. And listen, I know he's essentially a stand-in. I also watched him in Furia. This guy misses the... He's the NA Draken, unfortunately. You're not going to win things with him. OC is consistent and consistently brilliant. He's a superior player. With that in mind, let's also just address a little bit of drama that happened relating to the current ESL event. And because I know you like stupid arguments, and I like stupid arguments too, when the community have them. I think it's important we go on record to explain why they're stupid. So one of the things that ESL have been heavily criticised for is the Bad News Bears games have been in the early slot almost exclusively, which means that if you're an NA fan, you have to tune in at 3:30. Now, I'm sympathetic, obviously, if you're an NA fan and you want to get up and watch the NA team at the event, and it's 3:30 a.m. It's not optimal, although honestly, with our audience, you are probably still awake because you're a bunch of jobless rats, aren't you? But anyway... this argument is absolutely insanely stupid, because what ESL have to do when they put their calendar together is they want to have the highest peaks of viewership possible, right? And they also want to have relatively consistent viewership over the event. So to do that, you have to look at the teams that have fans and generate viewership. Yes. And as I've shown before with the esports charts report we've talked about on this podcast, Bad News Bears have no fans. It wouldn't matter where you put them. It wouldn't move the dial.
I stopped the random NA CSGO, self-described NA CSGO fan right now. I guarantee they couldn't name all 5 Bad News Bears players.
Yeah, of course.
They'll get a couple wrong for sure, at least.
Of course.
Here's the problem with this scenario, by the way. It's a point that, by the way, I suspect people have just copied, because it's a point Lurpus has made a lot recently. But his point, for obvious reasons, refers to like MIBR, because MIBR is inherently insane organic viewership. So his point, by the way, which is obviously your point as well, is that kind of consideration makes sense if we're talking about MIBR, Na'Vi, maybe like a Chinese team or something. It doesn't make sense that just because Bad News Bears is from NA, we treat them like the Team Liquid. Like, they aren't. Because as you say, what fans? Like, I'm going to go ahead and guess whoever's in their slot currently probably gets more views than they would, even if it was a better slot for Bad News Bears. You know what I mean? Like, nobody's there. Aren't they basically the least well-known team in the fucking Pro League? They're not big games.
Yeah. And look, again, as we said, Sam could bring this up. I urge people to just go and read this report. I like esports charts as a website. I like the fact as well that they've moved from not just giving you the numbers. They do these reports and blog posts that contextualize the numbers and what they mean. And they don't pull any punches. They write about how, like, they say Overwatch League is failing, the decline of viewership. Everywhere else you go, but the viewership, what it may be with the move to YouTube, and they tell it like it is. They don't fucking sugarcoat it. And they did a report, and we've referenced this on the podcast before. Jokes aside, North American CSGO scene is almost dead, and they do that predicated on a DreamHack tournament where the average viewership for an extra salt, by the way, their average viewership was 18,000. So what does a Bad News Bears do? What does a Bad News Bears? Yeah, what does a Bad News Bears do with a fucking stand-in? There is absolutely no point in giving them a prime slot, because all you're doing there is depriving the European fans potentially from having, from their viewership. Essentially, you want to get the Bad News Bears games out the way. Now, ESL will never come out and say this. They'll go, it was just the way the chips fell. We did a randometer, whatever. I'll tell you the reality. Bad News Bears will come in here to get 0-5'd in groups and fuck off and then probably fold, right? And listen, I'll also just add, because I know some of the Bad News Bears guys watch the show, there are 2 good players on that roster, John G and Swisher, and the rest, unfortunately, don't cut the mustard at tier 1. And that's just the brutal truth. And I feel sorry for those guys. I feel sorry that they're out there saying, please, can we have an org? Please, please, please. Obviously, I'm sympathetic. Obviously, I want underdogs to do well. But the reality is, you've got no right to expect that you're going to be put in a prime slot when your org doesn't have fans. They're called Bad News Bears, for fuck's sake. It's never going to be viewed as a serious sports enterprise, is it? And so if Extra Salt, who have come out as a new brand, done pretty well, founded by 2 guys, like ex-software developers. They fucking made this org. It's got a pretty good name, I think, you know, especially within gaming culture, you know, the salt and all of that, right? They've got a good team. They've already got a track record of developing talent. Bad News Bears has been an ESEA mixed team for fucking years. And honestly, it was PTR's project, and PTR's retired now. I think the wheels come off. I like Sheikh Zula, by the way, in Tier 2. I think he puts together great Tier 2 teams and has a record of launching talent himself, but NA's dead. All of those plaudits and all that good stuff you did, it doesn't matter anymore in the current landscape. Maybe it will one day in the future. It doesn't matter now. All you're doing is developing talent for Valorant. That's all you're doing now. So this was all the arguing and dick sucking on the forums about Bad News Bears and how ESL have fucked them over. Have a word. They should. If we were in an ideal world, Bad News Bears wouldn't even be in this fucking tournament to begin with, getting 0-5 and embarrassing themselves and having a bad time. So what I do feel immensely sorry for John G and Swisher. I hope they have opportunities within the game. But come on, guys, they're on at 3:30 a.m. because no one cares.
This is where fans do this thing that's utterly feckless, where they ask for something they don't even want. Like, I'll give you an example. A whole bunch of us in League of Legends made these clips channels. I saw you've made one now where you make like a short clip. Sounds great, right? Everyone tells you I've got a short attention span. No one ever fucking subs these channels. Go look, even people like I will dominate can't get anywhere close to the realistic.
I think I've just hit 5,000 subs.
Like, I'm not even joking. The only reason I even keep mine going is because I actually see value in it myself. Like, I can link to a specific topic I made or something, you know, like, and it doesn't cost much to run on the site. It's a small thing in it. But, like, my point is, a fan will ask for something that they think they want, but they don't actually want whatsoever, because this is why they're plebs. They're just fans, and other people in shadowy marketing rooms figure out and manipulate what they want and their desires that they clearly don't know themselves, because they themselves wouldn't get up and watch a fucking live Bad News Bears game. And why are they pretending they would, Richard? Like, I'm sick of people doing that, because we made the joke before. The same people who complained all the time about all this, oh, chaos and just something that. They don't watch these games, otherwise it wouldn't be 18,000 viewers if you watched them. You're just liars. Except here's the saddest thing of all. It's one thing when someone's a poser about following a big team. You're a fucking shit hipster in Counterstrike, pretending to like fucking what's basically a tier 2 team, but just that in NA it's so depleted it's tier 1 now, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there was loads of dumb stuff in that thread. Like, what really annoys me is the discourse around business decisions in esports on Reddit from people who don't even know how business works. You know, I saw an argument recently that's like, for example, there was a thread about Pansy and how Pansy apparently quit. Apparently Pansy quit CS this is the narrative this guy was spinning, to go and make more money because Valorant has more viewership. Now, all you have to do is look at the events she worked in 2019 and compare how many CS events she did to how many PUBG events she did, with PUBG being appreciably lower viewership than CS, to know there was obviously something more at play. She's not just financially motivated. She doesn't just
been a PUBG caster for the last few years, as you said.
Yeah. You know, so, and she came back into the fold via ESL in 2020, and, you know, barely. Obviously, she hasn't missed a beat. She's great at what she does. So, you know, just ridiculous. But then the central conceit there is that more viewership equals more money for on-air broadcast talent. Like, I wish that were true. But let me tell you, it's not true. For starters, you're competing against other broadcast talent. You might not be the best in show. You might be the guy who has to undercut all the other guys just to get on air. Yep. So it doesn't matter how popular the game is. You're fighting a sliding scale, you know, of economics as it relates to talent. So you've got that. Then on top of that, obviously, if you yourself have a big following, sometimes it's worth bringing you in, even on the smaller games, and you get an exorbitant fee. You know, so which I know plenty of people that happens to in our industry.
Tasteless, loads of people, of course. You bring them in because of the big name.
Then also the conceit that just because something has a lot of viewers, the people who run the tournaments are able to leverage that into sponsors. Absolutely not. Some people don't want to sponsor certain types of games. Some people can't sponsor certain types of games because they're a title sponsor of other games. They might even be looking over going, holy shit, that gets more viewership, but they can't just make the jump. So it's nonsense. So, you know, this is what I mean. Like, so much on Reddit are people arguing about business decisions. Do you know the first thing about the esports business? No, you literally look at a number on Twitch and say that game is successful, you know, and all the talent are millionaires because it's got a higher number than that one over there. That is just rank stupidity. That's got nothing to do with reality.
Dude, I'll give you my favourite take because it's in this vein and it's everything about it. Here's what's great. I won't explain why it's stupid. I'll just give it. And then what's great is we'll know why it's funny, but an idiot watching might just go, right, what's wrong? Right? When TSM at the end of last year in League of Legends, in the off season, TSM really needed to make a big signing, right? They needed like a massive name to come in because they were looking like dickheads compared to Cloud9 and Team Liquid, which are their rivals.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
They were signing like, you know, best European player and like good. So they really needed a win, right? So basically they went out there and they got a player who'd played in the world's finals. Problem is he's semi-washed now and he only used to be good a few years ago. But they signed this guy from Taiwan called Sword Art, right? And they also, because they waited till the end, and because they signed him in this fashion and basically for the name value and the fact that, you know, his stock's at the highest because he's been in the world's finals, they had to pay $6 million to get him. So in doing so, by the way, they effectively paid, basically for people who only follow CSGO, it's like if I wanted to get Simple, but I couldn't get Simple. And then I wanted to get Nico and I couldn't get Nico and I'd just get Stewie 2K in the end. Like, that obviously happened if people don't know. It's not as cool, is it? Like, at that point, what you want to tell the person is, look, if you couldn't get Simple and Nico, maybe just don't do the move. Like, you know, like certain names, there's a threshold. And it's not as sexy anymore. Well, this is what TSM fans are like. Cause a few, not even a few months in, like something like 6 months into this year, TSM signed that deal that says they've got a cryptocurrency exchange sponsor, which is $210 million worth over 10 years. Now, notice the key factor there. It's a 10-year deal. It's not $210 million for 1 year, Richard. It's $210 million for the next 10 years of sponsoring TSM. This was the real take from TSM fans. Everyone kept saying Reginald overspent, paying $6 million. I bet he doesn't even care about $6 million now. They really believe. They really believe if you had £21 in your pocket and someone said you're going to make that last a year, you'd go, "What's it? What's that? Like this much? Just fucking throw that in the what? £6? Well, it'd be less than that. You know what I mean? Like 60 pence. Just throw that in the fucking bit. There's going to be very quickly gone, isn't it? Like." Anyway, I won't explain it, but you get the point. Like, that's a perfect line in the sand. If you think that makes sense, you are an utter moron who will never be in any way independently or financially wealthy ever in your life. You don't understand even the basic margins. But to a moron, you can see how if they don't know anything, that sophistry almost makes sense. It almost makes sense.
Almost. So what else have we got? Oh, yeah, the Turkish super team is officially confirmed. It is called Eternal Fire, which is the organization they're going to play under. It's a new player-founded organization, apparently, and the roster is going to be Woxic, Xantares, Calix, Imor, and Issa will be the fifth.
Forgot about that one. I actually forgot this news, Richard, because that almost made my mate. Listen, I already said this lineup was it was almost like it. Let's be real, it's like a Frankenstein lineup. The only reason you're doing it is because it's sort of what fans would say, like on HLTV. Like, imagine if they all played together. Here's the problem with this move. Am I missing something? But the Issa one especially is mental because one, he's not Turkish, and two, am I really going crazy? There's the overlap of roles on this is ridiculous. Like, this really is a team of 4 left wingers. Like, this is mental. I don't understand how this team could ever function.
Yeah, it's definitely strange on paper. Just to the Issa point as well.
Not IGL, just four wingers, not IGL.
Yeah. Just to the Issa point as well, in case people haven't read the report or don't understand the geography, because there might be this assumption that, because Issa is from Jordan, there might be some sort of overlap linguistically. Well, no, there isn't. He should be able to learn Turkish relatively, quickly. My understanding is that some of the rules linguistically are similar, let's say, but they are going to have to speak English in the short term. Just to have Issa on the roster. So Duncan's point there is actually accurate in the sense that, by not having a fifth Turkish player, they're going to lose a little step in terms of communication. Now, I've heard Zantares and
the point of making the team was that they'd all be Turkish. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So it's not the same language, and they will. And as I said, I expect this to get up to speed on Turkish relatively quickly. But it's never ideal having a player come in and having to take lessons in a language while you're looking to bed them in, and it's also not ideal for teams to speak their second language when they're trying to be as efficient as possible. That being said, I agree with you. I think the makeup of this team is strange, but I'm also curiously excited by it, especially in the lay of the land now in Counterstrike. I like the idea of a side that it's going to be feast or famine in games. It's going to be absolute feast or famine. Like, if Woxic, Zantares, and Calix all turn up on any given day, I think they can mix it up with almost anybody, frankly, maybe outside of the real elite level teams, the very best teams. I don't expect them to clap a Na'Vi. I don't expect them to clap a Gambit. I don't expect them to clap, a G2. But outside of that, you know what? I think they've got upset potential, because I think that firepower can do damage, especially when you start looking at some of the other teams that maybe are, down in the doldrums right now. I mean, keep in mind, like, Astralis is dead in the water as things stand with this particular lineup. They're still ranked number 4 in the world. So there is territory to be grabbed for the teams way down the pecking order as the second half of the year kind of kicks off in earnest with ESL Pro League. So, listen, I'm not saying this is a top 10 team necessarily. Not going to commit to that. All I'm saying is, if they can get to a couple of big tournaments, keep your eye on them, because they, to me, are everything that people said about Oplano. If you said it about this team, you'd be right. Oplano, as we've seen with even again recent results, it just doesn't look like it's going to happen for them. All of this myth about them being motivated doesn't seem to be accurate. All of this myth, by the way, of like, as soon as they get picked up, they'll be like a top 20, top 10 team in the world. I don't know where you're pulling that from. There's absolutely no evidence to substantiate that. This team, on the other hand, could be a real surprise package. And while I know probably Turkey isn't a big market for esports, especially with recent decisions around internet censorship and whatnot over there, I think this is a team that people should definitely keep their eye on. I for example, I'd back them over a Renegades. I'd back them over an EG at the moment. I think this is a good roster.
Like, I don't hate the premise of making the roster, even though I just said I don't agree with like the players and the roles, in the sense that, like, realistically, what were they choosing it against? Like, Woxic didn't have fire offers. Calix tried to get signed after Envy. No one gave a fuck, unfortunately. Zantares has big, but I have to say, by the way, I think other top European teams will look out, went in big, and go, I don't know if I want Zantares, actually. So actually, to be fair, I don't think they have many offers. So in a world where they have nothing else to do, yeah, fuck it, all just play together, then see what you can do. I don't hate that.
The problem you've got, I think, is, like, again, when you have these regions within Counter-Strike where literally you have one good set of players, you can make one good core from all of the players that come out of your country, but unfortunately, the language is unique and unto itself, and also speaking English from that region isn't some sort of necessity or even an expectation. So you have to learn English just to get on in the world and play in international lineups. Maybe there's some crossover again. Maybe you're, of Turkish German origin, in which case, sure, you're going to get a secondary language there. Shame Germany's not what it was in CSGO, so you've got that problem. So you can see immediately how these guys are essentially on an island and isolated. And then you go, okay, well, look at the talent they've got. Yeah, but there's more to it than talent. You can't just, as we saw with Woxic and Cloud9, maybe it can't work. We saw our Woxic and Mouse.
Probably is an underrated lineup talent-wise, though, I will say, because obviously fans will think, some of these done. Like, some of them have mad skill. The eye test will tell you that bit.
Yeah, it's really tough when you start thinking about these countries where they have unbelievably talented players like a Xantares, like a Woxic, like a Calix, but unfortunately people can't justify signing them because of a language barrier, or it's not a big market, and so and they don't have exposure, they don't have big Twitter accounts, they're not going to move, they're not going to move a dial for a sponsor on a stream or whatever. So unfortunately they don't get the opportunities. In reality, this was this was the way it was going to work out for them. They were always going to end up together at some point, especially with the shrinkage that we've seen on this team. Now, here's what I'll say as well. Like, currently, the IGL situation is going to be an issue moving forward. I'll say this: I don't think Xantares is going to have what it takes to be an IGL. And in that case, if they're serious about this, they should drop Issa and they should go get Major and install him as the IGL. Major's playing for Sangal esports right now. I'm sure they've got the buying power to bring him across. And I've always rated Major and always thought remember, if you go back to the Space Soldiers kind of era, I always thought Major low-key deserved a lot more kind of respect he got just in terms of what he did as an IGL. So I think there is a potential move this team can even make to get to the next level. I don't think this is a long-term solution. I'll also add, I'm always skeptical when they say, oh yeah, they're learning the language. Kind of means that they're a stopgap player and you're going to kick them. It takes years to learn a language.
Excuse.
Yeah, it takes years to learn a language, and exactly, you're pocketing that excuse for later.
Yep.
Like, I remember when they told me, like, Tarek's learning Portuguese. Wake me up when he's learned English first, mate. You know what I mean? Like, fucking hell. Like, so I'm always skeptical about that. Love you, by the way, Tarek. That's just a joke. Yeah. That's a friendly joke.
With that said, though, if Elysian Naf are watching, I'd start working on your Portuguese, personally.
Yeah, actually.
Might not be, but he has a little bit, but I'd tune it up a bit more.
Yeah. Might not be a bad shout. So anyway, do love Tarek. So just want that on the record. That's what we call banter, children. So anyway, that was the Eternal Fire announcement. We'll be keeping an eye on them. Don't know when they're going to be next in action. We'll have to wait and see. And then this is the last news story we'll hit before we get into viewer questions. I saw you tweeting about this, so I know you got some thoughts. Obviously, the RMR. The last regional major ranking tournaments across all 6 regions is going to be run by ESL, and we're going to have a European event on LAN, which is great news, and it's going to be just called IEM Fall. But it's going to be North America, South America, CIS, Asia, and Oceania. And so far, we don't know much beyond that, except that the European one will be held at a currently undisclosed location featuring 24 teams. Just one point on this. The fact that it's an undisclosed location should tell you it's not going to be Malta, which is where ESL do all their, that's where they're essentially based now. Malta or Cologne are their 2 major spots where they're running these events.
It sounds like they haven't 100% confirmed the location when you say that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I don't think it can be Malta at the moment because I think they're getting absolutely battered by COVID, and I think they've got very strict lockdowns at the moment over there, and you don't know when that's going to change. So I don't think it can be Malta. I don't know what's going on in Germany at the moment. I'll be honest. I'm trying to filter out the constant stream of COVID news from my brain, so I haven't kept up to that. But I mean, it could be hilariously that they have to do it in Romania of all places.
Oh no, if that was to happen, I hope Astralis and I hope Nip would all come out and probably approach the King of Sweden and ask him to reconsider. Like, it's a fucking joke, isn't it, mate? All the jokes write themselves. Think of all the angles on this story. So one, ESL, unlike what all their little minions have done and stirred up the pot for the last month and a half, they get to have events in Romania instead of other countries like, I don't know, Sweden, where MTG, your fucking or the company that owns you, is based in Stockholm, for fuck's sake. How can you simultaneously tell PGL to have a tournament in your country, Sweden, when you won't have a tournament in Sweden, you want to have it in their country, Romania, where, in case people aren't following, you don't want them to have their tournament. Like, this whole thing is just like ESL exceptionalism has to end today. Then there's two other details, right? Here's one I can't believe people are cool with. People are cool with Europe having a LAN RMR and everyone else in the world's online. Everyone's cool with that. I'm sorry, this is qualification for the World Championship. Everyone gets a LAN or no one gets a LAN. That's the only way to make it fair. And then last detail, just for humour's sake, this is totally understandable because I imagine they already had the event ages ago. They announced IEM Fall. I know it was part of the Grand Slam, which I assume it will get taken out of now. And it was obviously part of the calendar from the beginning of the year. So I understand you named the event ages ago. But I am just going to say this is Clown World fucking 7.0. When last year we had tournaments like IEM Beijing Haidan, North American online tournament. This year we have a tournament called IEM Fall held on LAN in an actual city. None of this makes sense. We're in the fucking like Red Room in fucking Twin Peaks or something, mate. This is all just madness. This can't continue. Like, I know these are minor details, but it's like you're trying to fuck with my sanity or something.
I just love it, mate. I knew just dropping the word Romania, we're just going to set you off like a fucking Beyblade, mate. I knew, like. Yeah, listen, so that isn't confirmed, by the way, that detail. But again, my understanding is that ESL have certainly strongly considered Romania because right now...
No shame.
Right now, it's obviously a position centrally in Europe. It's easy to get to, and it doesn't have the restrictions, or indeed currently the amount of COVID cases that some other countries do. And so it's a good spot, and it's in for a hell of a windfall of esports events as a result of this. In the same way, a lot of NA teams and indeed a lot of European teams decamped to Serbia for the same reason and sort of set up, gaming houses and training facilities there because it's a central place in Europe. Romania's, and it's cost effective. Romania could be the same sort of destination. So there is a chance that the LAN happens at Romania, which, by the way, when it does, Duncan, I know you're already tweeting about, I'll be ready to go. They'll be.
Oh, good. Okay.
I'm just on standby these days because I'm like, I'm getting old now. I don't know if people have heard. I'm 39 years old. I'm old, and so I need to save my strength. Like I can only come out of that. Yeah, I can only come out of the hyperbolic time chamber when it's time to rumble. So I've got your back. I'll be there with you. I will be there with you, but I'm just biding my time until the announcement comes out. On announcement day, mate, I will be there. But yeah, I mean, look, I agree as well. Branding. They had an IEM Fall last year, right? It is a recognised part of the calendar.
Yeah, but I also had IEM Summer, for example. So they have changed it. Basically, the joke, obviously, like I was alluding to, was because it was so silly last year. This year, they didn't want to get caught like that again. So since they thought it'd all be online, they just named them generic things. But now it looks silly that you didn't have the tournament in the city last year. And this year, it's going to be weird to just call it IEM Fall if this one's in whatever location in it.
Yeah. So weird. Yeah. I'm like, look, I'll be banging on them. Like for real, but obviously the reality is if they do have it in Romania in a LAN environment, I totally agree.
What do you think of that angle, though, by the way? The fact that, like, one region gets a LAN? Because I know to fans, they're going to say the same as with, like, having limited viewership. Like, oh, it's better than nothing. But I actually do think because of it's, like, qualification. That feels unfair to me, mate. Like, imagine if I was in South America and I get upset by some bullshit team online and I could have won the major. I'm talking about back when they had, like, MIBR, obviously. And imagine in Europe, they just on LAN and then all the top teams qualify. I would feel, like, aggrieved.
So let's be clear. The COVID situation does create some logistical nightmares. So right now, as I understand it, Europe, there's a very broad spectrum of rules and regulations, and you can find countries where there are essentially little to no, there's no red tape to cut through, essentially. And so obviously having a LAN is doable every time for a European event. It just comes down to, are you going to be able to ensure player safety? And of course, orgs have to give players the option to not compete if they don't feel safe or if they don't want to. That absolutely has to be a component of it that people aren't talking about.
Probably even legally, by the way, if I had to guess.
Yes,
I don't think you could compel someone to work in an environment they don't shoot. They want if it's like a foreign country.
Well, I mean, look, put it this way: the NFL. Have got a sort of an exemption list. You can,
outs. Yeah. If people don't know, that was one of those areas where when everyone kept banging on about how bad the Patriots were, mate, some of their best players sat out. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, and so let's shift to NA.
Oh, I had one last thing to say, by the way. One thing I actually was surprised by, though, this is actually where the whole game of geopolitics is just nonsense PR. Like, most of that shit's not. Like, they don't know stuff about other countries and all that. Because here's the dumbest thing of all, Richard. You nailed it there. Every fucking team, seemingly, when you were talking behind the scenes, was like, right, we're off to Serbia. I'm going to Serbia. I'm boot camping in Serbia. Dude, why didn't countries like Serbia, Romania, I know it sounds cynical, but just basically advertise themselves within esports as we're the one location that let everyone come? They had a lot of these events. Some of these countries, if they'd been a bit more cynical like that, could have actually had events like entirely shifted to be at their location from the beginning, you know?
Well, I think it comes down to, you know, like some of these countries are aware of esports, and some of these countries also are aware of the potential financial benefits. And I'm just guessing Serbia perhaps, you know, didn't have like a lobbyist or a politician or a figurehead that was essentially quick enough on the ball, kind of, like you say, exploit the situation to their advantage. You know, had it been, let's say, you know, Romania was the chosen destination, I'm sure they would have absolutely fucking knocked it out the park, because they're very esports aware. Yes. And like I say, you know, they're going to get TI this year. That, you know, it's only gonna snowball upwards for them. But anyway, back to the you know, breakdown of where you can sort of do the lands. So let's look at NA now. So in Europe, it's 24 teams. NA is 12 teams, right? So again, fairly large amount of people having to travel when you consider coaches and analysts and managers and, you know, girlfriends and, you know, players. So you need to find a state where you're going to be able to do that. And again, you're going to get absolutely fucking beasted. So
actually, I hadn't thought of that. The media, if you go to like Florida, will just wreck you. Even if it's a legit event, they'll just claim you're putting your players at Arbor, so won't they?
Yeah, you could, you know, so the state you would have to go to would be a place like Florida. And unfortunately, the PR headache of running an event in Florida right now, it's not worth it. So then you're left with, well, could we work something out with maybe one of the states that have all the mandates, have all the issues? You're either gonna not be allowed, or you're gonna run into expense beyond.
Yeah, the problem is we are the NFL, so we're not going to get that, are we? We're not going to get whatever the fuck they get.
So while I understand a lot of people are saying you should be doing a LAN in NA, I'll also say as well, in terms of region, that's not the region I'm even worried about. NA is dead. Who gives a fuck? You know what? It's going to be, you know, bad news bears getting smashed by fucking Extra Salt in the final. Is that where we're at? Like, you know, everyone else has gone to Europe. So, you know, whatever. South America, again, I feel that, you know, the optics of having the qualifier for the major. I know
you're going already. Keep going. It's obvious which one we're going to land on it. I know.
Having the optics of having a major for the qualifier in the country that you can't have the major in because of the COVID cases. You can't do it. You can't do it. So you have, right. So you have to do that online. Then this is the stumbling block for me. There should be a LAN for CIS. I see no.
100%.
Yeah, I see
100%.
I see absolutely no reason for CIS to be denied a LAN.
As far as I know, by the way, if you ever look at videos online, Russia and stuff's wide open as far as I can tell. They don't even have the same restrictions.
Yeah. And you know, look, let's also be real. I know we don't talk about these things in the West for a variety of reasons. They've got their own vaccine out there, the fucking Sputnik vaccine or whatever, mad Soviet era names they leaned into for it. But, you know, and distribution is apparently going particularly well. I don't think they have like a significant amount of cases, but obviously Putin's Russia, make of that what you will. I'm pretty sure they'll be fudging the numbers at every opportunity they get. I know they're certainly fudging the death certificates, much like what they do with HIV. You can go and look into that if you're interested. But there's still no reason, as I can see it, to not have a LAN for the CIS. Even if, by the way, you've made them travel to one of these, you know, Central European countries. CIS is the strongest region overall we've got. It deserves the respect of a LAN. And here's the other component why I think the LAN for CIS.
Obvious one.
Yeah. Well, the last RMR was the one before that was a complete fucking load of bullshit. It was a load of bullshit. So for integrity issues, you have to do a LAN, because unfortunately, while CIS is one of the strongest regions, it's also one of the most fucking bent regions when it comes to match fixing and cheaters. So you've got to do it. Then you have Asia, only 4 teams from Asia. I mean, look, I'm sure China are running events. and no one even talks about COVID anymore, from what I can tell, except to show state propaganda of all the brave nurses and medical staff, and then they show you that with one hand, and then with the other hand, we haven't even got any cases. So I don't really understand Chinese state media sometimes. But I mean, you could probably do a LAN in Asia, and I'm sure you've got I don't know who ESL work with out there. Is it like NetEase or Nexon or
like that?
Yeah, whatever. So there'll be a company. I think Nexon's Korean, but you know what I mean. There'll be some
Perfect World. Maybe that's
Perfect World.
But they usually work with a lot of CS events, right?
Yeah. So Perfect World probably be a good shout. Yes. So you already have somebody that's capable of running a 14 fucking LAN for you in a building. So you probably should do that too. Frankly, Oceania absolutely can't happen. Australia and New Zealand are so far off the deep end, and I don't want to get into it because I know everyone will go fucking mental. I think that is deep end shit. I'm pro lockdown, pro vaccination, guys. Don't lose your mind. But I think, for example, New Zealand going into lockdown because one person has it. Maybe you don't do that. Maybe you just put them in quarantine and see what happens first. Whatever. Of course, then someone out there is going to say, but if one person has it, 2 people have it, and 3 people have it. And that's how it starts, and that's what we should have done, Richard. What, do you want grandma to die? No, I don't want grandma to die. I just think that's a little bit off the deep end. Anyway, irrespective of any of that, the fact that it's so off the deep end makes a LAN absolutely impossible right now. All travel is absolutely fucked. Everyone's in lockdown. You can't have a LAN in Oceania. In fact, I'm amazed that that there hasn't been a lot more made of the plight facing all the oceanic players, because right now this is the worst time to be an esports professional in Australia.
I know people don't want to hear this, but as it stands right now, there will be no major. There were politicians in Australia, I believe it's Australia, I forget which of the two it is because obviously I can't tell, right, who were saying stuff like, don't even leave your house at all if you don't need. They were even saying, don't order stuff so the guy brings the stuff to your door. Mate, they're not going to let you fucking leave the country and go to Sweden and have a major.
Yeah.
So now listen, good news is you didn't have any good teams at the moment anyway, as horrible as that sounds. It's not like you had a really good 100 Thieves team that was stuck there or something.
Yeah.
I will say, it is pretty dark if you're in that region. At the moment, no one knows when you're going to be part of the rest of CS, basically.
Well, it's not just a CS problem. I mean, those rules, those stipulations, that Australian esports was already playing catch up, and with the lockdown and the big match fixing thing that's gone through their court system and governments over there now. It's a dark time for us. My heart goes out to all because Australia's been, whether you know it or not, the Australians have, despite all of the problems with internet, infrastructure, sponsorships, travel, it's been a huge part of global esports for a long time. And right now, it is a dark time. There's a lot of people staring at the abyss of potentially losing their jobs. A lot of orgs are going to go under. So, it sucks. But as a result, you can't do a LAN. So basically, you are left with one LAN with a massive PR headache, one LAN that has to happen, in my opinion, for competitive integrity reasons, another LAN that's probably a luxury for 4 teams, and then the rest you can't really do, with the exception of Europe. So, it's 50-50. Obviously, by having one LAN, it looks good. But I agree. I think there's a little bit of, again, to use your term, there's a little bit of exceptionalism there. This idea that, it's the European region, all the big names, so we have to have a LAN there, and you're going to mug off the CIS region. I don't like that at all. I think that's disrespectful and shows a fundamental lack of understanding of where we're at right now in the Counterstrike scene. We're going to be heavily reliant, by the way, on the CIS teams to break viewership records. So if that matters to you at ESL, you might want to not create an environment where there's a potential for them to fall out of the tournament because Akuma decide they're going to just fucking throw, their magic tricks on again. So whatever, CIS, they need to make a LAN. I hope they announce that soon. So there you go. That's all the news. And that takes us into the segment everybody loves to turn off. And that is, of course, the viewer questions. If you pay $50 on the Patreon, you get to ask us anything, and we will attempt.
That's rhetorical questions. If you can't, just ask a question that's funnier than any answer. So we just answer to it. Yeah,
Carve is sort of like the fucking Ringo of BTN, isn't he now? Anyway, first off with the first question: what was the best ever moment from a no majors club? Now, obviously, Duncan,
I haven't been on that many, so
yeah,
you're gonna have to pick this one out for me.
Well, I know straight away off the top of my head.
Somebody do Dust, I'm assuming.
Oh no. No, because we wreck Dust just on a daily basis.
It's all blurred into one. There's too many.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. So you can't pick a moment out.
Where are we going then? Is it Anders? Is it Flower? Who are we going with here?
Davy's story about when he was a kid, he mistook Raid fly spray for insect repellent, and so he sprayed his entire body.
What's the difference?
So
wait, sorry, I'm confused with myself. Insect repellent is the one you do put on your body, right? Yes. I was thinking it meant the same thing. Okay, I see.
So he's put the poison that you put in the air, and he covered his entire body in it. Yeah. And basically, his mother was like, "Davey, what the fuck have you done? You smelling weird or whatever?" And he's like, "Oh, I've put all that insect repellent on me because I'm getting bit by mozzies." And he'd covered himself in Raid, which obviously is not good, especially not for a child. And his mother fucking freaked out, and Davey was like, "Am I gonna die?" Like, so he told this story. Obviously, people can go get the clip. He fucking ruined me. I was in fucking tears, man.
What's the thing is, before that, just before he put the Raid on, he was playing violins, virtuoso. He was fucking sick at Counterstrike. He was really good. Never recovered, sadly dead now.
No, that's the other thing as well. It's like, what would Davey have been if he hadn't have done that,
That's like what in real life you don't have like comic book shit. Like in real life, the toxic waste hits you, your life just gets a lot worse. You don't turn into a superhero, do you?
Yeah.
You just get a crippling chronic illness from toxic waste,
So, but like the whole No Majors Club, I mean, yeah, we had like, because it was a big community effort, we had obviously Mange 2B do all the metal songs for us. He literally wrote a composition that we paid him for. He did a theme tune for the No Majors Club. He wrote Back in the Game. Big Dave, obviously. The Vince moments are always hilarious. I mean, that's where we coined Vince cells, which, by the way, is aged fucking terribly.
I'll say it, even though it wasn't technically on the show, I'm sure you played it. So my favourite No Majors Club has to just be that Nico profile, because everything about that one was just, it was sick when it was so good.
Yeah. So I mean, look, I love the No Majors Club. I wish we all had the respective amounts of time where we can make it like an alternative hub for tournaments and be official partners, and we could all sit here on a couch in person. Maybe one day, but
one day indeed.
Yeah. But nearly said it. BP 420. Why do Western comics focus so heavily on superheroes and general cape shit?
Oh, good question.
Yeah, I'll let you start with this one.
I mean, basically, let's be real. Like, part of the problem of comics is like it does come out of an era where it was just for kids. And basically, if people don't know, part of why the industry's in a really bad spot is the current actual audience for comics are the same kids from the 1980s that were reading them back. It's not the newer generation. Like, kids now read manga, or they just don't read at all, do they? Or they just fucking go on their phone or something. So the problem is, like, you're not changing it as a result. It's inherently about nostalgia now. It's about like updating an old idea, taking an old character. Then there's also the whole angle that, like, I actually think there's an element of happenstance too, because if people don't know, just before, or actually around the time that comics originally came up, you had all this like sci-fi and pulp stuff, which funnily enough was outside this vein. Like, it was all science fiction, fantasy, like swords and sorcery type shit, westerns. Like, this used to, if people don't know, like the 1950s and 60s, magazines like this were huge. There would be like, like a boys' western stories or something, or like a famous one when we were a boy even was like, World War II type stories, or like in the UK it'd be like military action, like RAF soldiers or something, there'd be a little comic like that. And basically that was like one of the things, but basically those ones died off, and for some reason just superheroes became like such big media marketing, like what would you call them, properties, that because you could do movies and connections with McDonald's, it basically, they just sort of overtook the area. Because Alan Moore, the very great writer in the field, obviously writer of Watchmen and other stuff, he famously said that's one of the reasons he actually thinks the comic book medium is like massively underutilized, is because people think comics and they just think superheroes. And his analogy was, imagine if you went up to like a library of books and every book was just a Western. That's the only book that existed. And you thought, because you don't like Westerns, I'm not into books, just not for me. But you don't know that there is like, fucking, I don't know, Hirakami, there's fucking Nabokov, there's incredible sci-fi, there's Lord of the Rings, there's a million things. There's so many areas you could go in your imagination. So basically, I do think it is a massively like, depressing area of the medium that people think it's just comics or nothing, basically. Whereas, like,
Yeah.
if you go and read, for example, like Garth Ennis's work, you can write incredible comics that have fuck all to do with superheroes. It's actually just a great medium that's underutilized, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, there is actually a important historical aspect to that. I mean, I had to Google the dates, but basically, the main reason was because if you know your comic history, I've got a load of old school horror comics over there. I loved all that stuff. It's why Creepshow's like one of my fucking favorite movies. Basically, there were horror comics, legitimate, disturbing.
Used to be a big deal, yeah.
Horror comics, sci-fi comics. But then in '54, that's where you get the Comics Code Authority brought in their rules that you had to adhere to if you were publishing comics. And one of the big things they were worried about was what they called corruption or seduction of the innocent, I think it was. And so they all of those stories that you originally had that could be edgy and talking about horror and talking about sci-fi, they just went away because it was really hard to write a dramatic story, you know, where nobody dies, no one gets hurt, you know, there's no Faustian pact that somebody enters into because you can't have Satan involved, you know, and things like this. So basically, when we talk about Western comics, obviously the big push is from the US. The US, around the same time, post-war, you have this big push as well for superheroes, and superheroes were the sort of evolution of the Western, the idea of the lone hero, you know, up against incredible odds and overcomes. That was already a trope in American media because it goes straight to manifest destiny and how the West was won and all the misinformation kids were being raised with at that time. And so obviously you have all these superheroes who have a good moral code. They're good moral, you know, morally upright people in difficult situations. Also, of course, as well, there was a lot of in New York where a lot of the comics came out of. You had a lot of Jewish writers, and so obviously this is where you get Judeo-Christian iconography coming in. So that Superman is, you know, Moses essentially, right? He's put in the basket from outer space. He's floated down the river, and here he is. You know, you've got, you know, Super Moses. That's what Superman is essentially. And so all of those things, Westerns and Judeo-Christian iconography, they slip through the Comics Code Authority because you can say, look, they're morally upstanding characters. They don't kill their enemies. There's all this Christian iconography in there. It'll actually help children appreciate the Bible. And so you can make all these arguments for superheroes you can't make for all other types of medium. So without the CCA, comics would have been very different in the West. For me, that's the ultimate moment.
Yeah, I've actually got a detail I can add on that because actually I forgot that story about the Comic Code. If people don't know, it was actually Alan Moore's run on the comic Swamp Thing, which obviously has horror connections, which is basically what allowed some comics to not have to use that Comics Code anymore, which had been like under that grip for like, I think like 40 years or something mad. Because basically, since Alan Moore was like a massive name in the industry, for his comic, they were like, oh, we'll let it go for this. And then as far as I know, they just gradually phased it out for all the edgy titles. That's why all the Vertigo titles kind of like popped off in the 90s in it. So the sad thing is, we have actually come out of that now, but you can't like put the clamps on people creatively for 40 or 50 years and then think you just take it off and it goes back to how it was. No, a lot of interest in the medium's died out basically.
Yeah, exactly. And also as well, during that time, other regions that weren't hampered have kind of like also been able to push the envelope. So, you know, what are you going to be able to do? But in a way, I think what you have got in the West now is I think you've got really complex and layered storytelling. You know, Alan Moore obviously being
they're very adult compared to what they used to be, for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, like, not just adult in theme. So, you know, for example, I've read some like, you know, mangas where it is just like insane levels of ultra violence and gore, and that's essentially that's what you're there to see.
Yes.
You know, that's what's being very clearly advertised. You are going to get a visceral amount of violence, and that's the selling point. The story, not so much. Meanwhile, you will see, you know, for example, Neil Gaiman's Sandman comic book series, which is it stands right up there with Watchmen for me in terms of its appreciation of literary tropes and how educational it is. You know, in and of itself, and how it's an incredible adventure into the realm of imagination itself, essentially. So, you know, I think it hindered us in some areas in the West. I think it helped us in some other areas. You know, if you have to tell grown-up stories because you can't just tell the pulpy stuff, you do that for 40 years, you end up with, you know, that's probably why the comic books that are so highly regarded stand up to any novel you are, you know, likely to read. So those are my thoughts on that. Good question, BP. Appreciate it. Reykjavik on Steam. Now that Danny from the hit YouTube channel Rate My Takeaways started moving as far afield to locations such as Camden Market, is there a chance he might be able to build enough influence to become a title sponsor of the Overwatch League? Have you seen this guy, by the way, Duncan? He's a fat man from Leeds. And what he does is he rates takeaways.
Inherently, that's not a bad idea. It's just I'm going to guess he's like some fucking ridiculous character, like some moron or something, is he?
He put me on the spot here because he's really well liked. Because there's a tragic story, you see, Duncan. So his wife passed away, and that's why he's sort of doing it, like, you know, I guess fill the hours or whatever. And it's blown up because he's a likable guy. You know, he's just a down-to-earth, fat working class man from Leeds who just.
This is like a shit version of the show Afterlife that Ricky Gervais did, but he just reviews takeaways instead of just works at that paper or something.
Yeah. Now.
With more compassion put into my explanation.
Yeah. But like, I'll also be honest, unfortunately, there is a formulaic component to his content. The
problem is, if you say he's a fat mess, I could imagine it's so underwhelming. Like, I imagine he just goes, and I'm going to be reviewing this. Oh, his chips are great. It's like, yeah, but they're always are, mate, for you, you fucking fat cunt. Put it down. Like,
no, that's the point.
It's everything a 9 out of 10. I'm guessing. I was hungry, so fucking.
I've seen him do one bad review.
Right? Come on! At least if you're a critic, most of them have to be semi-bad, don't they?
I know. And this is the thing. Unfortunately, he's because he's an affable guy. He's an affable guy, so he does his video. He goes, "Now then, guys!" And so he starts every video. And he goes, "Now then, guys, how are you doing back on road again? And this time I'm driving down to Bristol because to fight a seagull for a chip in a dustbin." Like he's like, and he says where he's going to go, and then he goes and he puts his chair and table outside, you know, in the street, and because he's blowing up on YouTube now, people are literally taking selfies with him, like, trying to do the like, who wants a selfie of the Rate My Takeaway guy? Like, what you doing with that? Passing that one down to your kids, are you? But anyway, so he does the review, and then the problem he's got is, which you've immediately identified, everything's good, and he has a very limited vocabulary with which to express.
Let's just mint this.
So what he does is he goes, right, the things that he will always like and will always point out is if something is nicely spiced. He says that all the time. He goes, "Oh, that's nicely spiced." And it's like, well, what does that mean? What spices? What flavors? Fortunately, he hasn't got that far in his food critic journey.
Eloquence as a fucking critic is a bit of a ridiculous weakness to have in it.
He doesn't know like how to say the different spices. He probably couldn't even tell you know, what a cardamom pod is, or, you know, whatever. Like, so he just says, "Oh, that's nicely spiced." The other thing he likes, crispy. The batter's nice and crispy. He loves crispy batter. The batter's got to be crispy. I will give him that. He's a stickler for crispy batter. Maybe batter's a bit soggy there. He will criticize if your batter's not crispy.
Okay.
And then I should ask Sam. Sam watches his stuff. What's the other thing he always says? Nicely spiced.
It's the impressions you're doing are almost worse than I thought from the stereotype. He's going, back here, that's it, the spot right there with it.
Yeah. And then I think what's the other one he says all the fucking time? Nicely spiced, crispy batter, tons of flavour. What type of flavour is just left to you? You tons of flavour. Great that is. And so the one time he did a bad review was like, "Now then, guys, back on road again, going up to Edinburgh where I can get a family box of meat for £8 or something, right?" And he went up to,
of course, I know.
Yeah, right, yeah, fucking right. So he goes up to Edinburgh, and it's a box of like chicken nuggets, kebab meat. Okay. And it's all just lumped into one of them giant pizza boxes, right? And admit, I've never seen him turn down food, but he bites into this sausage, and it's the classic deep fried Scottish sausage where it is fucking pink and slimy in the middle. Like, you can't fuck with that shit. And he's gone, "Oh, I'm not going to finish that. I'll be ill. Be ill if I finish that." And then he said, "Look, I know that," he tried to qualify. He goes, "I know this is designed to feed family on cheap, but that's not for me, that is. I've got to give that a 7. I think he 7 was like the
It's
worst.
a 7. I know.
Yeah,
Fucking
yeah.
hell. Who's he?
I don't know. I'm making that bit up. I am making that bit up.
Nah, it's probably true though. Probably true, isn't it?
Yeah, and for some reason he just ate sweet corn. He does. He just ate sweet corn. Someone, there you go. See, he did get a 2. People in the chat, because it's deep lore on my Discord now, because I introduced everyone to it on the stream. Now then, guys. But the problem, like I say, he's doing 1 and sometimes 2 reviews a day. Sometimes the videos he hasn't even changed his clothes, so you know he's done it in the same day. So he's gone to Bradford to have a kebab at 12, and then he's gone to fucking Middlesbrough to have a Paramo at fucking 6. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not one to talk about diets, but fucking hell, mate, come on. Have a day off.
The thing. This is where you're thinking there's nothing left on this story. But I'm already going to blow your minds with a potential, get ready, potential best of by the numbers segment coming up here. Because here's the thing. Way back in the day in esports, in the early days of esports, obviously, by the way, it goes without saying, if you go to like any Western European country, eating kebab is what gamers did back then when they were all really unhealthy. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So way back in the day when I went to the Nordic region, a guy that I knew who was in esports told me, like, oh, you got to check out this site. Because there was a site like that. There was a guy who did a kebab review of everywhere in like Sweden and Finland or something, right? Which sounds shit, but it was actually fire. Like, he actually did it for real though, Richard. Like, he did like a really good review. And so as a result, if you checked them, like, I actually went to a few of them. Some of them were legit. And this is where I'm going to take this story and make it totally ridiculous. Because even though inherently a kebab is just a kebab, even the best kebab in the world is just a kebab, I can't lie. There is one kebab somewhere in Finland, which one, I won't tell you the name of the place because it makes me paranoid it gets shut down or too many people go or something. And 2, I'm not even joking. I in my life will go to Finland again just to go to this place and have that kebab. So there we go. There's the story. It's ridiculous, but it's true.
Nice. I'll admit, I'm all on board. Like, we've got a lot of Finns as well on the like.
Finnish kebab's mad underrated. It's pretty good actually.
Yeah, I'll have to ask around. But anyway, basically that's rate my takeaway. Watch one video, Duncan. Like, I will say, if you've seen one video, you've seen them all. But yeah, just give it a watch. Give it a watch and let me know what you think. Chingu, what do you consider the highlights of each of your respective careers? So does he want us to do each other? Or does he want us to do ourselves?
I'm assuming, yeah.
Highlights of
It's a
each
collective
of your
question, isn't it? So I'm
yeah, no, just do ourselves. I can't do your highlight. That makes no sense, Richard. Your brain's capsizing. Right, all right, yeah, go on then. I'll let you go first for this. You must have a highlight.
The problem is, right, let me think. What would my actual highlight be?
Roasting Shaq's got to be.
The problem is that's what everyone would say. It's the obvious one, right? But here's the problem. Even though it was amazing, in some ways, I know this sounds mad. This is actually, I'll tell everyone as a very quick aside. One of the weird things about me, actually, that probably allows me to be so prolific with my work is even the best day of work ever, I get up the next day and that memory's gone. I'm on to the next day. You know, I don't really have sort of the memory that I know. It's weird because in my job I am very sentimental with history and great players, and I'll be very effusive and I'll go back and talk about some cunt from 2002. But with my own life, I don't really do it, mate. I sort of just keep going forwards and shit. That's
usually.
Yeah. So actually on that actual day, that was amazing. Yeah, it was obviously like super insane. Like, I mean, the mad thing is, I remember even some people now I don't get along with, like, my DMs were just full that day with all people in esports, like, holy shit, like, what the. But here's the thing, that would be the obvious one. The other one I'd maybe pick, just because it's a pretty cool one, would be, was pretty cool getting hired for ESL1 Cologne 2016, Richard. Basically, there's one of those ones every dickhead hater told me would never happen. So that was one of the ultimate, like, piss in your face type moments. So that was pretty good too.
So
what yours be though? I'm wondering what yours would be.
It's hard, like, because I mean, I've got the same pettiness you have. So, for example, like, if I was approached to work this major, I'd say yes. Not because, you know, it's going to be cool to be there, which would be true, right? But the main driving force would be to just say to everyone who said I wouldn't get hired for any events and I'm irrelevant, just to say fuck off. Which, by the way, that's such a poisonous shit way to live your life.
It is.
But that is also how I roll, so I can't help it.
Though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Like, it is. So there is that. But I don't know. I mean, like, because there's, like, you know, I'm probably supposed to say being entered into the Lifetime Achievement Awards for esports. Like, but nah, not really.
It's got to be league related for you, surely.
Yeah, I mean, being on TV, doing that first show, that was good. That was a mad adrenaline dump after doing, like, live American TV. That first show, I literally dropped to my knees and fucking wept. I was so fucking fancy, like, doing that.
if people don't know, this is how, like, listen, one thing I don't ever do normally, right, is I don't ever describe myself as unlucky. Because believe it or not, at the period in my life when I was unsuccessful, or not as successful as I am now, I used to think I was unlucky, right? And what I realized is it's just about what you focus on. Like, for example, I am unlucky in certain ways. Some ways I'm mega lucky. Like, think of some of the shit that's happened in my career. But I will say, what happened to me with E-League was so fucked. Because if people don't know, I was obviously fully hired. I had the entire contract signed. It was never, ever up in the air, by the way, as to whether me or Mo did E-League. I had a whole contract for the entire year. Yeah. It's just that they didn't get the visa because I actually was one of the original people who had the request for
Mo was your standing, essentially. And exactly. And nobody wanted me to fucking hire him, but I said, we need somebody who is capable of saying outrageous things, but within limits and understand the parameters, and it's more.
And he obviously killed it for that week, but here's the downside, right?
He was so good. Like,
here's what people don't know. Because that was the first week of E-League, when it finished, they were all getting given champagne by the producers, and people, as Richard was saying, people were crying and having emotions. I wasn't there. I was stuck in my fucking home in the northeast of England. Yeah. When I did come, like 3 weeks later, it was always sort of like, oh, all right, what are you doing? And then there was no fanfare, there was no champagne, there's fuck all. Yeah, that's my life. Sound. More drink my fucking champagne.
Yeah, more have your champagne. But I mean, like, just on the Moore point as well, because I don't think we ever said this. We did nearly rehire him. People don't realise it wasn't like
I think he would have been a good fit.
Mate, the idea of like you, Moses, and Moore sort of
I guarantee.
It would have took what was already great to a fucking higher level. But basically, he was like, "You are going to have to offer me more money because I make X amount a day streaming." With me and Mo, obviously, still talk as I've known him for years, and I know he's been involved in some shady shit. But like, I just, everyone's got that one guy where it's like you don't support what they do, but you've just known them too long, So it's like, whatever. I'm never going to renounce him. Everyone always wants me to renounce him. I'm not a renouncer by rule, but I'm definitely never going to renounce him. Like, so I'll criticize shit he does.
Anyone's.
Still love him. So
it's the thing. You can renounce the action. You never renounce a friend. What are you even as a human if you do that?
Yeah. So I mean, like when like Mo did say to me last time we talked about it, he said he wished he could turn back time and took the offer. He realizes now that
I think to myself, because here's the problem. Moses is great on a desk, and he obviously would have been great on that desk too. But here's the thing: if we'd have had me, Mo, and you on that deck, we would have actually had the Inside the NBA vibe. And they would have already known what to do with that vibe too. That's the other thing.
Yeah, and so I mean, look, E-League's up there, but I'll also probably throw in a little bit of a curveball. I mean, the other one. So like these are just top three, I guess you could do in any day. Obviously, doing that first show of E-League. Boston Major cast with Henry. Me and him obviously started out. I brought him into casting when we did a Dignitas Cup, and then we did a season of ESEA, I think, together. And then he obviously became the best caster in the world and won that award, and I became this. But us doing the Boston Major show match together and people liking it and thinking it was funny and us vibing together like the old days, that was sick. And then probably that fucking speech at the Game Awards where I just got up and fucking lit all the games journalists up. Again, it's got that...
Sports Awards. Game Awards is that shit one.
Oh, yeah. Sports Awards. Yes. Yeah, I would never get a chance to...
no, that's a legendary speech, because here's the thing, that was also like sort of 10 years in the coming, basically, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, like, for me, just the fact that I got to get up and light everyone up and say what everyone has been
the response to it.
Yeah. Standing ovation as well, because everyone was so pissed off with these fucking bums, just writing nonsense, and trying to cancel people, not for any discernible reason, but just so they could install themselves as gatekeepers over our industry. Everyone was thinking it. Everyone was feeling it. I was the guy that got up and said it, and I nearly didn't, but I'm glad I did. So it's probably that for me. I think that'll be one of the things I'll be remembered for when I'm dead. So Jerky's Minion. What item at Wimpy's did or do you enjoy eating?
Does Wimpy's exist still?
Yeah, I think in Europe, funnily enough.
Because that was one of those things that people don't know. When I was a boy, Wimpy's sort of was like a not as good version of a McDonald's or Burger King, basically. And it used to actually be in similar locations. But as far as I knew, they all went out in like the 90s or something, didn't they? I've never even been in 20 years, 30 years.
Some would argue better, because obviously, remember, one of the big things they used to advertise is you don't just eat it hunched over a styrofoam container. We give you a plate, we give you a knife and a fork. But now, try not to laugh and do the obvious joke here, Duncan. But let me tell you, they had an item on the menu, and it was called Bender in a bun, right?
Why?
I see, yeah. Right? A bender in a bun, it was called. And that came from, they used to do this sausage on the menu that was just called a bender. So you would go in and say, can I have a bender, please? Right? And then a bender in a bun was basically a sausage sandwich, but it was a proper, like, I don't know, one of them ones they have in, like a chipolata or whatever, you know, it was like a big proper sausage, a big meaty sausage called a bender. You could have a bender in a bun. And so bender in a bun was the best thing on the menu for me. I used to love
why they
them.
shut this down, this fucking chain, and the marketing's unreal.
Yeah. So people can Google it, right? If you don't believe me, Google. In fact, I'm just going to Google it to make sure I haven't just made that up in my brain because there's always.
That sounds like they literally only named the fucking product that so that they could have plausible deniability for 80s Tory politicians going in and asking for it, thinking it was a code word.
Yeah. No, it's that. It's there. It's still advertised on Wimpy, which still exists. I'm on the Wimpy website now. They are still serving benders in a bun, although these ones just look like hot dogs.
From what I can remember, like I'm saying, it's been a long time. The actual burgers were pretty legit. Like from what I remember, they were half decent at Wimpy actually. So I'm gonna just say a hamburger then. There you go.
So I'll read what they say about the bender in a bun, right? The rule breaker, it's called, like big capitals, named after its unique circular shape. The bender has been a Wimpy institution for well over 60 years. This meaty, porky Frankfurter, nicely spiced with a hint of ginger and pepper and a natural smoke flavouring, is revered by the public. When we experimented with changing its name to Frankfurter in a bun in the late 90s, there was such an outcry, we had to reinstate it as the titular bender. There you go, guys. So people even said, like, oh, you can't call it that. And then they changed it and everyone went, where are the benders at? So there you go. Bender in a bun. Wimpy's. Great. If you get a chance to go to a Wimpy, if you live near like the two that are left, order a bender in a bun. You won't regret it. Zumba, who do you enjoy making fun of most in esports other than D-Man? So,
I'm not even sure D-Man is the top one. He's just an easy target, isn't he? And he was just a bit of a twat at times. So it's just, you know, it was like sort of poetic justice, wasn't it? The obvious one to me would probably just be ESL. And it's not even actually, by the way, that it's just that they're so lampoonable because their problem is they have like some of it's not even just like being German, by the way. I'm not even going to make it like a stereotype of being German. Some of it's just that some of them are sort of like, there's not even a polite way to say this. Some of them are just corporate drones. And unfortunately, like their version of a personality is like, I like games too. It's like, that can't be it. That really is. So as a result, they're just so mockable because they really are sort of like the avatar of like the faceless fucking corporation that's in esports that just drives things for money and metrics and doesn't seem to care about certain spiritual aspects of the scene, as it were, you know. So I would probably say ESL, they're always on the top of the fucking list, aren't they?
yeah, it's really hard for me because a lot of the stuff I do, I don't really consider it making fun. I consider it like legitimate critique, right? You know, it's kind of tough. But, I mean, obviously, the fucking state of almost anyone on an executive level around Overwatch.
Oh, some ridiculous ones, aren't there?
Yeah, it's just too easy. It is like shooting fish in a barrel, but it's also hilarious. And just watching, you know, remember, there's still that video, by the way, of me in 2016 when the league was announced, laying out exactly how it was going to fail and what was going to happen. And literally, it's like it's followed my fucking roadmap. That's another thing I've been working on a story at the moment, Duncan. I've been investigating all of that stuff that's been going on behind the scenes about the sponsors. Mate, it's mental. It's absolutely mental. Like, owners are absolutely fucking, you know, they can't, there are so many people who would sell if they could, but they can't because guess who has to approve the sale? Activision Blizzard.
By the way, am I wrong? Wasn't it the fucking Mad Lions guy, that like exec? Wasn't he the one who made that mad statement like a year and a half ago where it was like, you know, like owling, like, I'm going to say it's one of those ones that's like in 5 years it'll be as big as the NFL or so. Wasn't it some mad shit like, the biggest one in esports? So, well, didn't he make some mad pronouncement like that?
Yeah, he said that it was something like in 3 years, I don't even think it was 5, every Overwatch will be the premier esports league. That's what he said. And it's like, mate, are you fucking, like, what are you huffing? Like, to even get there? Like,
it's not like he said this at the beginning when you could maybe be forgiven for like being too optimistic, you know. He said this like 2020 or something. I know,
yeah, it's like, it's so crazy.
So risible, people,
yeah. Anyway, Carve. Here's Carves. I'm sure you guys have been looking on aghast at current events around the world as I have. Seeing a group so reviled sweep away everyone who stands in...
I already know where this is going. I'm just sitting back, right? So we're going on. Let's see how this goes.
Do the joke, Carv. Seeing a group so reviled sweep away everyone who stands in their way has been pretty tough on the soul. Their core beliefs and values, in particular the attitudes and behaviour towards women, is absolutely deplorable. However, their popular...
Keep going. I know, keep going. I know exactly where this punchline's going.
However, their popularity grows and grows with an army of zealots supporting them, mired in tribalism. They hope to see the complete destruction of Western civilization and stand ready to destroy anyone who tries to stop them. As we've seen recently, they are even willing to partner with any corrupt regime in world politics that can help expand their power base. Truly, they are the face of evil in the modern world.
Yeah.
But anyway, what's next for Activision Blizzard?
There we go.
And will the 5-person squad meta in Overwatch 2 be a success? So...
By the way, if people out there, because you know there's going to be people try and copy this but fail, here's why you will fail, right? Because he's actually has it. Here's the thing: he's thought up not only the premise, which is good, he's actually he's nailing the execution. Like, you notice the way he phrases it is actually very well phrased. Like I could see what the joke was. I know jokes, but that was a very well written joke, actually.
Yeah, no, Carv's obviously smart. Like, Carv's one of the good guys. Appreciate your joke, Carv. Last question, Daniel Magnuson. What is happening with Nork? He would be a good replacement instead of Chiquinho if they don't go for Smooya. I felt like Nork was one of the best knit players with some banging maps at the end of his time there and didn't deserve to be dropped. I also just want to thank you for the podcast. I don't have to take my opinions from HLTV confirmed, and I can at least pretend to have a backbone. Thanks, Daniel. Nork, it was actually put out just today, wasn't it, that they are considering all offers for him, but they specifically stated loan offers. So this suggests to me there's been a round of, they've put him out there. No one wants to pay the buyout. I'm guessing the buyout's sizable. So instead they're saying if you want to take on the salary component, the salary burden, you can have the player. And listen, I agree. I think... we said it on the show. I think when Nork went, he was another example of we said it. He did nothing wrong. The difference here is it's device. It's one of the greatest of all time. So it's like that's always going to happen. But I mean, again, like I don't know what the limitations on his movement are. I don't know what type of teams he could play for, where he'd want to go, whatever. But yeah, I agree. I think Nork should be a highly desirable AWPer. Again, it might not be a great fit over at Liquid, but he was AWPing better than Fallen is now. Probably not an option for him, although they have gone Scandic before in the past. And yeah, I would take him over Chiquinho. I know I feel terrible because I'm pretty sure Chiquinho watches the show, and I'm fairly critical of him. I just don't rate him as a tier 1 AWPer yet. Maybe he can prove me wrong. A lot of people disagree with me on that front, but I feel like Nork would be an upgrade. But I also think Alex has to give Chiquinho a run before he can justify a replacement. So we'll wait and see. What are your thoughts on Nork?
The problem I have is this. For me, he was still a player with that dreaded term potential on. Like, even in NIP, for the whole time he was there, he was always mad up and down. And, he would have occasional games where he looked really good. So I don't hate it. Like, it seemed like Fnatic would be up for giving it a go. I do agree with you, though. In my opinion, if you're not going to give a guy an actual fucking try in the team, why not cut him before you get Alex? Like, why not do it like that? What's the point in bringing someone in and then going, you're cut immediately? It's like, at least give him a fucking shot. Like, I would do it like you say. You let Alex try Chiquinho. If it doesn't work, it could even be a few weeks and you know that. Then you give this a go because, I know it doesn't have to be a Swedish player, but that's not a terrible player. He certainly's had potential, I thought. When I watched him in NIP, I thought he's someone who could be someone in a year or two. And that was a couple of years ago.
So there you go. That's the show. Went longer than I thought. So that's good. All your content. Couple of things I'll just plug at the end. We are going to be announcing a new sponsor for the show in a week or two. It seems to be locked down. We're just waiting on a few little bits and pieces. So looking forward to another fruitful partnership. Also as well, I've completed the interview everyone wanted. Smooya. It's locked in. We've done the podcast. 90 minutes of Smooya reflecting about his career. Got some interesting anecdotes. One little spoiler for you. The time Flamey nearly joined Mouse Sports, I think it was. Oh, sorry, but Big, rather, when he was being touted around. So loads of crazy stuff there. It's a good one. It's done. It'll be out probably in the next day or two. Just keep an eye for it out on the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to that because every time we upload a video, 50 of you get unsubbed. YouTube's still on that bullshit. So anyway, there you go. Shout out to the sponsor as well. NordVPN. Great product, great sponsor. Love them. Go to nordvpn.com/RLS to get yourself 74% off. And of course, all the patrons that brought the show back from the dead. Our $100 patrons, Jerky's Minion, Chris with 2 S's, Will the Weed Wrangler, Cathal, J-Dubs, Tobias Bernasconi, Carv, Benakagi, and Marcus Kumpar. And of course, our $50 patrons, Otarian, Frankie, J-Ray, Zumba, Petty Grievances, Tim Frost, Bukowski, Dancer Master, Adam Ox, Nolan, Judas, Canapacito, Airhammer, Norwegian Clamai, Bacon, Goody Woody, Zarathenia, Gern Kaya, Lonnie, Fursock, Daniel Magnuson, Echo, Rez, Miss Alcoholic, BP420, Watch Doge, Reykjavik on Steam, Carter, CMAC1991, Alex C, and Sard Sawar. That was By the Numbers. We'll be back next week. Until then, take care of yourself.